Chapter 301. Xie Yunting tried to ignore his wildly beating heart, then coldly said, "If I let you go this time, what are you going to do?" Wei Wei Bai buried herself in her food, vaguely saying, "I plan to go to Jiangnan." The Jiangnan in the ancient poem is particularly beautiful. Xie Yunting heard her unrealistic words and sneered. "What about travel expenses? What about travel permits? What about your identification? Also, with your appearance, you won't be able to walk 2 steps before being robbed." Wei Wei Bai froze, seriously frowning in thought. Xie Yunting stepped up to attack her. "You see, you can't even cook. You can't eat hard things. You're used to a life of luxury. Do you think you can still eat plain tea?" Wei Wei Bai frowned. "The outside world is very scary. It's better to go back to the palace. Even if I become emperor, I won't kill you." Wei Wei Bai seemed to be moved. "But what can I do in the palace?" "Xie Yunting, you don't have to do anything. I'll just raise you." Wei Wei Bai looked up, seemingly surprised. Xie Yunting found that he was too anxious, and his heart tensed up. "I mean, raising an idle person like you, I can still make the decision." Wei Wei Bai couldn't help but laugh out loud. "If I didn't know, I would think you like me." "Like?" Xie Yunting immediately turned his face away, afraid of being seen through. He had feelings for her. Could he really use such a pure word like? Thinking of this, his ears couldn't help but turn red. Ding! The male lead's favorability has increased to 55. The system held its head. "This favorability is like sitting on a rocket. Your method of flirting has reached a new level?" Wei Wei Bai indifferently said, "If I flirt more, I'll be familiar." After communicating with the system, she brewed her feelings, and then her expression became sad. "For me, the palace is like a shackle. If I can get rid of it, then any price is worth it." Xie Yunting's charming and gentle thoughts were all shattered by her words. He turned cold. "Shackles?" Wei Wei Bai nodded solemnly. "So, I'm very happy to be able to escape from the palace." "Xie Yunting, don't you have anyone to worry about in the palace?" Wei Wei Bai thought for a while. "There is one person I'm worried about." Xie Yunting's heart jumped. He nervously asked, "Who is it?" "Was it him?" Wei Wei Bai said without hesitation, "Chun Jingji, this person is a real pillar of the family. He's as smart as you are." Xie Yunting suppressed his sneer. "Is that so?" That was why she praised him and worshipped him. Actually, they could all be given to others. As long as someone had the same talent as her, she would treat them differently. Why did he think that he was special in her eyes? He really wanted to kill Chun Jingji. After the meal, she chatted with Xie Yunting for a while before she began to feel sleepy. Then she went to bed without a care. Xie Yunting was lying outside, so she went inside. He stared at her, dumbfounded. Wei Wei Bai saw him staring at her and couldn't help but say, "There's only one bed. You're a patient. I can't let you sleep on the floor." "Xie Yunting, aren't you afraid?" "Wei Wei Bai, what's there to be afraid of? We're all men. What's there to be afraid of?" Xie Yunting remembered that the little emperor didn't have the concept that men could do that. Then he watched her sleep with a complicated expression. Late at night, people's hearts began to be confused. Xie Yunting listened to the breathing of the person next to him, up and down, like the changes in his body. His mouth was dry, and the pain of his wound couldn't stop his imagination from running wild. He struggled to get up and looked sideways. He saw Wei Wei Bai's sleeping face. A quiet and pure face, but it emitted an aura that made him crazy. Xie Yunting reached out and gently touched her face. Soft and smooth, he couldn't help but keep touching. His fingers finally came to her neckline, and he breathed heavily. To facilitate the next reading, you can click on at the bottom to record this reading. Chapter 302. He hesitated for a moment, but didn't undo her clothes. It wasn't that he was afraid of seeing her flat chest, but, with his appearance, apart from secretly touching a bit of incense, he didn't have the strength to force himself on her. He might even scare her and make her run away. The cunning Tai Fu didn't dare to take the risk, so he listened to her breathing and judged that she was still asleep. Only then did he dare to lean over and kiss those lips that were constantly seducing him. As soon as this kiss fell, he was so excited that his body tensed up. soft and slightly cool to the touch, unexpectedly clean and sweet. Xia Yunting felt that he had completely fallen. He really was a homosexual, and a madman who only had feelings for the little emperor. He couldn't help but stick out his tongue, prying open her lips, wanting to go deeper. Wei Wei Bai frowned in discomfort, and she moaned. Xia Yunting was so nervous that his whole body was tense. He suddenly retreated, but then suddenly stopped. Could it be that he wanted to hide his dirty thoughts from her for the rest of his life? Or could he bear it, silently watching her from afar? Xia Yunting's mind was in chaos. In the end, he realized that he really was black-hearted. He wanted her. Even if he had to drag her into hell, he wasn't willing to let her leave him. Xia Yunting's eyes were filled with ruthlessness. He lowered his head again, and his hands couldn't help but tear open her clothes. It wasn't impossible to uncover everything. Just as he was about to kiss her again, the sound of many people's footsteps came from outside, as well as the flickering shadows of torches. His rescue, or Zhao Wang's assassins. Xia Yunting listened to the sound of footsteps and vaguely guessed. Wei Wei Bai was also awakened. Her eyes were blank, sleepy, and there were still traces of his kiss on her lips. Cute, a feast for the eyes. She heard the footsteps outside, and her eyes instantly sobered. Who is it? Xia Yunting didn't hide his guess. It's someone who came to rescue us. Wei Wei Bai suddenly let out a sigh of relief, and then immediately stepped over him. Ignoring his gloomy expression, she jumped off the bed and pulled out a bundle from under the bed. These are my clothes, as well as some jade pendants hanging on my body. I've also taken the things hanging on your body. Also, can you lend me your money pouch? Wei Wei Bai flung her bag and prepared to run away. Then I'm leaving, Xia Yunting. Xia Yunting's fingers gripped the edge of the bed. You really won't consider staying? Wei Wei Bai smiled easily. No need. I really don't want to be a puppet emperor, and I don't want to be a caged bird. You promised to let me go. Xia Yunting listened as the rescuers got closer and closer. He tried to stay calm and delay her departure. Why don't I give you more money and guards when you're saved? Then I'll send you out of the palace. Wei Wei Bai hesitated for a moment. Just when he thought that the little emperor had been convinced by him, Wei Wei Bai suddenly opened the door and saw many torches in the distance. Forget it. Let's just part ways like this. Xia Yunting only felt that her careless attitude made his blood flow in reverse. He said coldly and calmly, Come here. You haven't been out before. I'll tell you something you should pay attention to when you go out. Wei Wei Bai turned her head, her eyes filled with pure trust. I didn't expect Tai Fu to be such a warm-hearted person. She smiled and walked to the bed. Xia Yunting also smiled. He suddenly reached out and grabbed her arm. Such a terrifying strength, as if it was cast from iron. Wei Wei Bai's face changed. What are you doing, Tai Fu? Xia Yunting's smile, under the light, looked so sinister and crazy. I want to ask the emperor to return to the palace. Wei Wei Bai finally couldn't help but get angry. You promised me to let me go. The door was already knocked open. Sure enough, it was the rescuers. The guards fell to their knees. In Xia Yunting's eyes, there was only the little emperor's panicked face. He suddenly pushed. He pushed her to the ground. Then he looked down at her. I'll let you go unless I die. His voice was filled with a ferocious determination to win. Ding! The male lead's favorability has increased to 60. Chapter 303. Then, without giving Wei Wei Bai any time to react, he directly ordered them to return to the palace. Wei Wei Bai was carried into the carriage. Xia Yunting also got into the carriage. Even if he was injured like this, he had to watch her with his own eyes and not let her run away. Wei Wei Bai was shocked and angry. She leaned against the side of the carriage, not leaning against him. Xia Yunting saw that her eyes were full of anger, without the slightest bit of gentleness from before. His face also became gloomy. The carriage rushed forward. When the sky was a little brighter, they saw the palace gates. Xia Yunting looked at her and found that her face was pale, her fingers tightly gripping her clothes. As soon as they entered the palace gates, it was no longer up to her. Was that why she was so panicked? Wei Wei Bai noticed his gaze and finally couldn't help it. Her voice carried a trace of pleading. Xie Yunting, I can immediately write an edict to abdicate. It's not too late for you to let me go now. If you take me back, you'll have to wait for me to die before you can succeed. If I run now, you can directly succeed. As soon as Xie Yunting heard her words, the evil fire in his heart couldn't help but rise. Enough. The Emperor will live for 100 years. Even if you want to die, I have many ways to extend your life. Wei Bai was puzzled. She said, My life is not good for you. Xie Yunting's eyes were burning with irritation. His handsome face, in the dark of the carriage, had a ghostly chill. The Emperor naturally has benefits. This subject hasn't enjoyed it yet. How can I let you go? Wei Bai inexplicably shouted, What benefits can I have? You are a heinous minister who forced the abdication of the throne. Besides being the Emperor, do you have any other path? If the minister didn't go up a level and was counterattacked by the puppet Emperor, his family would be confiscated and exterminated. She was very angry, but his attention was attracted by her angry and captivating face, those moist eyes, and slightly opened lips. From the day he saw the little Emperor, she had a terrible attraction to him. Xie Yunting unhurriedly said, The Emperor is so worried about this official's life. Is it because he likes this official? These words were clearly said as if nothing had happened, but it sounded as if something had happened. So much so that Xie Yunting almost convinced himself that the little Emperor liked him. Otherwise, why would they care so much about whether he could become the Emperor or not? This thought flashed through his mind. Wei Bai heard the system's reminder. Countdown to the 5 thunder bombardment of heavens. You will be blasted into smithereens with one more use. I bid farewell to the host in advance. Have a safe trip. Take care of yourself, my ass. Who wants to leave? Xie Yunting, no one had ever loved him since he was a child. Every day he fantasized about other people loving him. She had already pledged her life to him, and he still thought she liked him? How shameless was that? Wei Bai's face turned pale. This was not an act, it was real. This was the first time he felt such a sense of crisis. If she was struck by lightning before she could finish raising her favorable impression points, she wouldn't be able to die in peace. Wei Bai's expression immediately changed. She held onto the carriage with a shocked expression. Taifu, are you kidding me? Like you? We are all men. How can you say that you like me? Xie Yunting's heart sank. The little Emperor was very averse to male love? Just as he thought this, he saw her face full of disgust and her eyes full of disgust. Taifu, even if you want a joke, don't make such a low-level, shameless, and disgusting joke. What I hate most in my life is 2 men together. Just thinking about that picture makes me unable to eat for 3 days and unable to sleep for 10 days. It's too disgusting. // Chapter 304. These words were spoken quickly and urgently. It was as if even getting involved in this topic was like getting involved in something dirty. Xie Yunting only felt that his heart was being stabbed by her words again and again, dripping with blood. She felt disgusted. She was not ashamed of this feeling. Xie Yunting suddenly felt that he was very ridiculous. He clearly knew that the little Emperor hated him to the bone. His feelings for her could not be tolerated by the secular world. Even he himself was disgusted by those rabbits, wasn't he? So why did he feel that the little Emperor would not be disgusted by him, or even like him? What a joke. Xie Yunting felt that his heart was full of thoughts, and her eyes were unbearably dirty. This kind of recognition made his heart cold. There was even a dark thought that screamed desperately in his mind. So what? He was not those rabbits, who could come and go as she wished. He was the one who could control her life and death. No matter how disgusted she was, she could not drive him away. The darkness in Xie Yunting's heart finally condensed. He seemed to be on his deathbed. If, in this world, there is a man who admires you, Wei Bai was afraid that if she answered too slowly, he would blindly imagine that she liked him. So she immediately waved her hand to interrupt him. Don't say if. Just thinking about it makes me sick. If you say more, I'll vomit. Wei Bai did not care about favorability. If she did not ruthlessly attack him, he would have nothing left to live for. She would be directly struck to death by lightning. She was afraid that she wasn't vicious enough and that he wasn't desperate enough. She ruthlessly added another stab. If there is such a person with a twisted mind who does not love women and only loves men, he should be killed early, so as not to dirty my eyes. Xie Yunting's face was completely drained of blood. What was he still expecting? Could he still expect that she would be happy after hearing it? He suddenly laughed, but there was no smile in his eyes. It was so cold that it made people's hair stand on end. Wei Weibai trembled. Slagstem, this target feels like he's going crazy. Did I say something bad? The system retorted. Don't you have any idea whether it sounds bad or not? Wei Weibai, has there ever been a case where the host was hacked to death after failing a strategy? The system asked. Did you kill him? Wei Weibai breathed a sigh of relief. The system continued faintly. There are many who die these days. Wei Weibai, Xie Yunting's laughter faded, but his voice was full of killing intent. It seems that the Emperor still doesn't know his place. You don't have the right to kill anyone now. Wei Weibai also snorted. That's true. Now it's the Grand Tutor who decides the life and death of others. Xie Yunting coldly said, I can't just decide life and death. I can also decide what you like. After saying this, he closed his eyes in silence. As for the wound on his waist, because he was too angry, it had already reopened, and blood slowly seeped into his clothes. Wei Weibai saw it and asked, Grand Tutor, did your wound open? Xie Yunting's eyes widened in anger. If the Emperor is so disgusted with this subject, then shut up and don't speak. On one hand, she said disgusted, but on the other hand, she was concerned about him. She was like this. Did she want to torment him to death? Wei Weibai coldly said, When was I disgusted with you? I'm disgusted with those filthy people who like men. Who cares about you? I'm afraid that if you die, I won't be able to live. Xie Yunting's people were all around. If he died, how could she get away with it? Xie Yunting sneered. You'll soon be disgusted. / button at the bottom to record this reading. Chapter 305. The carriage finally arrived at the palace. The palace gates opened and the carriage smoothly entered. Xie Yunting's wound was a bit heavy, so a group of imperial physicians rushed to treat him. Wei Weibai returned to her own leaky palace. Gao Jixiang was so excited that she cried and laughed. After comforting this crazy person, she tiredly went to take a bath. While taking a bath, 2 buns fell out. She silently threw them away. They definitely didn't taste good. Her dress was also taken off, and her chest was tightly bound by long strips of cloth. Wei Weibai said that even if it wasn't tied up, it would still be like an airport runway. The original owner had been tied up for several years. There was no room for development. So how could it be big? She untied it, and sure enough, it was too small to hold. Wei Weibai cried. Slagstem, this is the first time I've been so flat. System, have you ever been flat? Isn't it the same? Wei Weibai, how is it the same? Although my real body isn't very big, it still has weight. System, the difference between a poached egg and a boiled egg is the egg. If you complain again, I'll give you 2 durians. Wei Weibai silently turned the poached egg into a pan. Forget it, if it's too big, it'll be uncomfortable to tie it up like this. After taking a bath and eating, Wei Weibai was just about to lie down on the bed to rest. In the palace that had been empty for thousands of years, a group of people suddenly rushed in. Wei Weibai suddenly woke up, but found that it was one of Xie Yunting's trusted eunuchs. The eunuch smiled politely. Emperor, Tai Tu told me to invite you. Wei Weibai. It's so late, Jean is tired. The eunuch nodded, his smile unchanged. Emperor is tired. Come, bring the sedan chair. Wei Weibai didn't have time to protest before she was carried onto the sedan chair. Fortunately, she was vigilant, and even when she slept, she tied up her chest and wore clothes. So no one saw anything. When she arrived at Xie Yunting's residence, she was invited in. As soon as she entered, it was brightly lit. A group of imperial physicians frowned. Wei Weibai stepped forward, but found that Xie Yunting was already delirious. His face was covered in cold sweat, and he was running a high fever. He kept shouting, By Wei Emperor. The eunuch from before came over again. Your Majesty, this servant acted on my own accord. The Grand Tutor had already fainted, but he kept calling your name, so this servant asked you to come over. Wei Wei Bai walked over. What's wrong? Is the wound serious? The imperial physician came over. An evil wind has entered the wound, causing the Grand Tutor to have a high fever. If he stays like this until tomorrow morning, he hesitated, but Wei Wei Bai understood. If he continued to burn like this tomorrow, even if he didn't die, he would become a retard. Wei Wei Bai came to his side. Xie Yunting? Suddenly, her hand was grabbed by someone. Xie Yunting opened his eyes. He was burned to this extent, but his eyes were still terrifyingly cold. Don't even think about leaving. He stared at her and refused to let go. Wei Wei Bai was helpless. Where else can Jin go? Xie Yunting turned a deaf ear. You're not allowed to leave. You're not allowed to go anywhere. Wei Wei Bai, did the fever make him stupid? She could only sit by the bed and have someone wipe his body to cool him down and give him medicine. When the medicine was given, Xie Yunting was willful again. Bitter, I won't drink. Wei Wei Bai was afraid that if he died, her plan would fail. She could only patiently coax him. It's not bitter. Drink it and see. Xie Yunting was confused by the fever, but he was astute. If it's not bitter, then why don't you drink? Wei Wei Bai, I'm not sick. I don't need to drink. Xie Yunting, I'm not sick either. Wei Wei Bai, no, you're sick, very sick. Chapter 306. Xie Yunting sneered, haha, you lied to me. You just want to poison me. Wei Wei Bai asked the system, can I poison him? System, life value. Wei Wei Bai immediately became gentle with Xie Yunting. I'll take a sip, you take a sip, okay? Xie Yunting stared at her, then suddenly whispered, you're very good. Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to 65. By Wei Wei, this favorability increase is too much of a child's play. The burned and confused Xie Yunting is a good strategy. Xie Yunting said, you're as good as my mother who died early. Wei Wei Bai really wanted to dump the bowl of medicine in his face and throw the 5 points of favorability in his face. Did this mean that she would die early, or that she was as old as his mother? In any case, in the early hours of the morning, Xie Yunting's fever subsided. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief. After all, if Xie Yunting was going to die, they would all die. Wei Wei Bai was also very tired. Even when he fell asleep, she didn't let go. She could only lean against the bed and sleep with difficulty. When Xie Yunting woke up, he looked up to see the little emperor leaning against the bed, sleeping tiredly. He still had some impressions of what happened last night. She patiently coaxed him to drink the medicine. That scene firmly occupied his mind. His hands and feet were weak, but he still managed to get up. When the little emperor slept, her lips were still tightly pursed. Under her slightly raised eyelashes, there was a faint shadow. Very tired, but there was still a kind of strength that made his heart palpitate. He gently kissed her lips. As soon as he touched her, he felt that she was going to wake up. He almost had a violent idea of letting her discover his filthy thoughts in this way. But his mind recalled last night, the way she guarded him. He couldn't help but soften. When Wei Wei Bai opened her eyes, she saw Xie Yunting lying on the bed, looking at her with burning eyes. Taifu, you're fine. Can you let go of my hand? Wei Wei Bai felt that her hand was going to break. Xie Yunting said, I can't. Wei Wei Bai was expressionless. If you don't let go, my hand will be crippled. His blood was blocked, and his entire body was numb. Only then did Xie Yunting let go. Wei Wei Bai stood up. Since the Grand Tutor has recovered, we will go back and rest. Behind her, Xie Yunting said, I thought the Emperor would hate me to death. Wei Wei Bai was stunned. After a moment of silence, she turned around and said in a helpless tone, This Emperor truly wishes for you to die. When Xie Yunting heard this, his heart ached. There was even a surge of ruthlessness. But you can't die. Wei Wei Bai turned around and walked out step by step. If you die, the world will be in chaos. Right now, the world is relying on your strength to maintain peace. I can't let the people suffer from war and civil strife. She was clearly so petite and fragile, but at this moment, her back as she walked out, facing the sun, seemed to be incomparably tall. You are the best choice, So before there is a better choice, I don't want anything to happen to you. With Xie Yunting's death, the army would be the first to fall into chaos. Coupled with her lack of power, the power struggle for the throne inside and outside the court would directly lead to war. Xie Yunting's voice was cold. Is this the only reason you don't want me to die? She was smart, and her heart was for the people. Every word of not wanting him to die was for the sake of the people. Such an open and above-board personality, but it made him hate her more and more. Wei Wei Bai turned around at the door, suddenly revealing a beautiful smile. Of course, it's because this emperor worshipped the Grand Tutor. These words made him uncontrollably tremble all over. He only felt that his heart was disturbed by her words. How could she disturb his heart like this? And read the at https://www.sashu.com/ and read at https://www.sashu.com and read the at https://m.sashu.com. Chapter 307. After Wei Wei Bai finished flirting with him, she turned and ran away. The Tai Fu was left alone on the bed, flustered. Xie Yunting covered the wound on his waist and suddenly slammed the bed. Hating me is fine. I don't care about love. Unable to get the heart, getting the person was just a thought for him. Xie Yunting didn't know how desperate his eyes were when he thought this. He didn't know if it was because he was thinking about the little emperor, but the wound healed surprisingly quickly. In less than half a month, it was basically healed. And in this half a month, Wei Wei Bai was caught by Xie Yunting's trusted eunuch every day, accompanying Xie Yunting to eat 3 meals. And Wei Wei Bai used the time to eat to slowly increase the favorability to 70. During this time, outside the palace, Zhao Wang's men had completely torn off all pretense of cordiality with the court. After an unsuccessful assassination attempt, Zhao Wang joined forces with the local powers around him and began to rebel. Xie Yunting was not a vegetarian. He could even succeed in forcing the emperor to abdicate. Zhao Wang's group did not enter his eyes. So while he was recuperating, he began to gather an army, one step at a time to encircle and suppress Zhao Wang. Wei Wei Bai was a puppet. When Xie Yunting was busy to death, she was still very leisurely. The system sometimes felt that its host was just a good-for-nothing waiting to die. There was no sense of nervousness that a conqueror should have. It would occasionally recall the days when it didn't tie up Wei Wei Bai. That was called glorious. When the system saw it, they all rushed to hug its thigh, calling it Zhang, calling it Grandpa. As a result, after following Wei Wei Bai, the system sometimes looked through its own inventory, only to find that it was already penniless and burdened with debt. If it wasn't for that mistake, the system stopped reminiscing, it sighed. A mistake was a mistake. Besides, the host was stingy, cheap, ruthless, heartless, fickle, and liar. The host was pretty good. Wei Wei Bai, Slagstim? The system who was reminiscing about the past said, Wei Wei Bai said, I'm fine. I thought you were dead, so I called you. It's good that you're not dead. The system replied, I won't die even if you do. Are you going to stand or lie down when the lightning strikes you? Wei Wei Bai was expressionless. I plan to hug you. We love each other so much. How can I let you suffer alone in this world? System. It's wrong. It still wants to change hosts. Wei Wei Bai was bored. After all, if there wasn't a good opportunity, it would be hard for her to increase her favorability. In any case, 6 months was more than enough for her, so she decided to just sit around and wait for death. After Xie Yunting recovered from his injuries, because of the urgent military situation with Prince Zhao, he left the palace to lead the army. Before he left, he looked at her deeply. Does the emperor have any parting words? Wei Wei Bai said, Goodbye. I won't see you out. Xie Yunting. He was silent for a while, then looked at her with dark eyes and said, The emperor should pray that this official comes back later, because this official can't wait any longer. After he finished speaking, he rode out of the palace to lead the army. It was said that in less than 10 days, Prince Zhao was beaten into retreat. Wei Wei Bai felt it was a pity that she couldn't follow him. Otherwise, he would be stabbed a few more times. Without her by his side, she wouldn't be able to increase his favorability. Master, it's time to rest. Gao Jixiang brought water over and helped Wei Wei Bai wash her hands and wipe her face. Wei Wei Bai, who had just finished eating, nodded. How's the Grand Tutor? Gao Jixiang said. Didn't the Grand Tutor send a letter to Master? Wei Wei Bai said. I'm too lazy to read it. She was now afraid of that crazy Xie Yunting. She was afraid that if she was more attentive, he would misunderstand it as liking him. If he misunderstood her again, she would be electrocuted to pieces. So she acted as cold as she could. Increasing favorability, there was no one else who could do such a terrible thing. Gao Jixiang thought of Wei Wei Bai's situation and knew how much he hated that thief Xie. He said, Prince Zhao is retreating in defeat. With Xie Yunting here, he will soon be defeated. // Chapter 308. Xie Yunting had easily succeeded in forcing the emperor to abdicate. Defeating Zhao Wang wasn't a difficult matter. Wei Wei Bai didn't care about this. After all, as long as Xie Yunting didn't die, it was enough. She carelessly said, Then I'm going to rest. Wei Wei Bai went to bed and obediently covered herself with a quilt to sleep. A person needed to have a good spirit to have energy to work. Xie Yunting should be back soon. How should she perform to gain favorability without making him misunderstand that she liked him? She would beat him into a masochist. She would slap him and gain favorability. It would definitely be very cool. Wei Wei Bai smiled as she fell asleep. Halfway through her sleep, she was awakened by the thunder and lightning outside. She dazedly looked outside the bed. It seemed to be a heavy rainstorm. Heavy rainstorms in winter were rare. She yawned and closed her eyes to continue sleeping. As a result, the door creaked open. The smell of blood mixed with the cold wind rushed in. Wei Wei Bai shivered and suddenly woke up. Gao Jixiang, who was on night watch, was gone. The palace was empty, and at the door came the sound of unhurried footsteps. Wei Wei Bai, Slagstim, is there a ghost? This atmosphere was like the scene of a ghost movie. The system faintly, played a desolate and ghostly eru. It said, At the door stood a woman in white with long hair. Her mouth split to the back of her head, her eyes hanging half out of their sockets. Covered in blood, step by step, she walked in from the door. Wei Wei Bai was frightened. She immediately pulled the quilt over her head. Don't come here. She was most afraid of ghosts. The footsteps paused, then suddenly accelerated. In the blink of an eye, a tall figure had appeared by the bed. It seems that the emperor really didn't want this official to come back. The person outside the bed still had the cold harshness of returning from the battlefield. When Wei Wei Bai heard this, she looked up and saw Xie Yunting wearing armor. The armor was stained with blood. His handsome face in the flickering candlelight had a cold and austere air. This man had rushed here from the battlefield. He smiled coldly. Perhaps the emperor wishes for this subject to die on the battlefield. When Wei Wei Bai saw that it was not a ghost, she heaved a sigh of relief and said, The imperial court still relies on Grand Tutor. Of course, we hope that Grand Tutor can win. Xie Yunting had just seen the letters casually tossed aside on her desk. Not a single one was opened. When he was on the battlefield, his days and nights were about to be torn in half by longing. However, the little emperor did not give him the slightest bit of hope. Not a single one of his letters was answered. Finally, the battle situation was stabilized. He rushed over in the middle of the night and didn't even have time to change his clothes. In the end, it was just his wishful thinking. The little emperor slept and ate well, not caring about him at all. Xie Yunting felt that he had always been demanding. He was demanding the world, and he was one step away from success. But he didn't dare to take this step, because compared to the world, what he wanted more was, it was her. Xie Yunting's eyes darkened as he began to undo his armor. Wei Wei Bai looked at him, puzzled. Does Grand Tutor need someone to come and serve you? Xie Yunting's voice was hoarse. No, it's a beautiful day. It's also a beautiful thing for us monarchs and ministers to talk through the night. Beautiful day? Thunder and lightning rumbled outside, and heavy rain poured down. Flowers waned, and the moon hid. Xie Yunting took off his armor, revealing the clothes inside. But he didn't stop, continuing to take off his outer clothes. Wei Wei Bai frowned. Do you need someone to bring you clothes? Our clothes are not suitable for Grand Tutor. //. Chapter 309. After all, the difference in height between the two of them was so great, he definitely couldn't wear it. Xie Yunting's movements paused. Seeing that she was still so naive, he finally couldn't help but reveal his wolf's fangs. This official wants to discuss something with the Emperor. Wei Wei Bai, what is it? Xie Yunting stretched out his long legs and got on the bed, squeezing Wei Wei Bai onto the bed. He reached out and took off his inner clothes, revealing his strong upper body. This subject has seen too many parting of life and death on the battlefield. I feel that people should live freely and freely. Otherwise, this subject will die one day without being able to meet your majesty. Wouldn't I die with my eyes wide open? Wei Wei Bai blankly stared at him. What are you touching me for? She looked innocent, like a child who didn't understand anything. Xie Yunting didn't allow her to escape. He suddenly reached out, grabbed her chin, and fiercely kissed her. Wei Wei Bai was frightened and reached out to push him away. He fiercely bit her lip, and the pain made her shrink back and tremble. Only then did Xie Yunting release her, the darkness in his eyes pouring out like a nest. His slightly red eyes were filled with burning passion. Emperor, this official wants to discuss something with you. Wei Wei Bai trembled all over. She looked at him in disbelief, as if she was still in a nightmare. What are you doing? What are you doing? Xie Yunting. Xie Yunting reached out and grabbed her struggling hands, raising them high above her head. His tall body shrouded her. Wei Wei Bai was like a pitiful little animal. She could only tremble in the shadow of this fierce beast. Isn't the emperor always worried that after you enter the palace, this official will take the throne, and you won't have a place to sit? Wei Wei Bai looked at him in horror. You? What is below you? Xie Yunting's lower body was already hard enough to explode. He clung to the little emperor's body, his expression still cold and normal. What is below this official does the emperor want to see? Wei Wei Bai's expression changed. Xie Yunting laughed out loud. Sure enough, the emperor knows. What is this subject's next? Wei Wei Bai was scared. We don't know. Get lost, Xie Yunting. Xie Yunting's smile twisted. You don't know? You're so smart, but you've been pretending to be ignorant in front of me. Bai Wei, are you happy to see me being played like a fool by you? Wei Wei Bai clenched her teeth. Xie Yunting, get the hell out of here, and I won't bother about your disobedience tonight. Xie Yunting completely ignored her. You've always known how I feel about you. Not only do I want your position, but I also want you. Thunder and lightning rumbled in the light of thunder and lightning. Wei Wei Bai's face was frighteningly pale. Xie Yunting lowered his head and approached her. Emperor, this minister will let you sit on the throne. Okay? Wei Wei Bai's eyes trembled. Xie Yunting's lips were almost touching hers, and his breath was overwhelming. A subject is still a subject, and a monarch is still a monarch. As long as I'm here, you'll be the emperor for one day. This temptation was simply irresistible. Wei Wei Bai suddenly laughed bitterly. Xie Yunting, you're a madman. Yes, I always knew that you had those dirty thoughts about me. Although he had long guessed, hearing her say it out loud, Xie Yunting still felt his heart hurt. The little emperor's cleverness was not that of an innocent fool, so he barely concealed his dirty thoughts, and she must have long seen them. And after seeing them, she pretended not to know, but in her heart, she was disgusted. Wei Wei Bai coldly snorted. You get lost. At worst, I won't be the emperor anymore. I said, what I hate the most are men who like gay men. As soon as she finished speaking, Xie Yunting's hand couldn't help but pinch. Wei Wei Bai only felt that her hands were about to be broken by him. The next moment, her lips were captured. His lips were cold, but with a fiery attack. Chapter 310. You can search Transmigration System, Male God, come to Sashu, Com in Baidu to find the. Wei Wei Bai didn't have time to react. Her teeth were pried open, and his tongue entered her lips, twisting and turning. She whimpered and struggled, but her feet were firmly pressed down. There was no room to escape. Xie Yunting had always been sneakily tasting her. When did he taste her so unscrupulously? Her taste, compared to the taste of his dreams, was much better. Wei Wei Bai felt like she was going to die. Not die by the sun, but by a kiss. Xie Yunting pressed down on her, squeezing out the last of the air in her chest. Her face was pale, her expression tight, and her eyes filled with a desperate struggle. Suffocating, the lack of oxygen was painful. Xie Yunting misunderstood her expression. Being treated like this by him, she was in so much pain. His movements stiffened. Wei Wei Bai pushed him away with all her might, finally letting his lips leave. Xie Yunting, stop for us. She looked at him with misty eyes. Her tied-up hair was messy, and her body trembled with fear. Xie Yunting felt like his soul was being taken away by her. She struggled and trembled under him. Every time she rubbed against him, it made him go crazy. How could someone be so delicate and cute, yet be able to completely seduce the beast in his heart? Ding! The male lead's favorability has increased to 75. Wei Wei Bai, this can also increase favorability. Men really are animals that think with the lower half of their body. Xie Yunting's fingers rubbed against her lips, his voice dark and sexy. Emperor, the night is long. This minister is afraid that you will be too lonely, so I can only sacrifice myself to accompany you. By Wei Wei, I've seen a lot of brazen and shameless people, but not as shameless as Tai Fu. As if seeing the humiliation in her eyes, he laughed in a low voice. His fingers pulled open her tightly clasped collar, revealing her snow-white neck. Wei Wei Bai's pupils constricted. Get out of my way, you filthy traitor. Filthy. Xie Yunting's eyes deepened, and his movements paused. Wei Wei Bai felt as if she had found a life-saving straw. She angrily and humiliatingly scolded him. Who do you think you are? You're a renegade hated by the heavens. What right do you have to touch me? You're just a wild dog thief who thinks you're on equal footing with me? Get the hell out of here. How dare you use the idea of a gay man on me? Aren't you afraid of being struck by lightning? Just as he finished speaking, there was another rumbling sound outside the door. The lightning illuminated Xie Yunting's face, pale as a ghost. Xie Yunting's smile twisted. It seems that the Emperor still doesn't know his place. I am a proud and arrogant renegade, and you are the renegade spoils of war. As he spoke, he unhesitatingly tore open her outer garment, revealing her inner garment. His fingers pinched her delicate body through her clothes. She was truly a pampered jade. This feeling was even warmer and more beautiful than flowers. She was really afraid that he would crush her if he used too much strength. How could a boy be so gentle? The tyranny in his heart was drawn out. Wei Wei Bai let out a sharp gasp. She couldn't bear the strength of his fingers, her eyes filled with tears. Xie Yunting's eyes darkened, condensing into ferocious desire. He gently smiled, his fingers slowly moving down. His mouth was not the least bit lenient. Your Majesty, now this subject wants the monarch to die. The monarch must die. This subject wants the monarch to be happy. The monarch must be happy. How does the Emperor feel to be defiled by a filthy renegade? Download the at https://m/sashu. To facilitate your next reading, you can click the button at the bottom to record this reading. Chapter 311. Wei Wei Bai finally broke down. She trembled as she curled up. Don't do this to me, Xie Yunting. Don't force me. How pitiful. Xie Yunting sighed hypocritically and couldn't help but lower his head to kiss her again. The more she struggled, the crazier he became. This entangling kiss was intense and oppressive. She couldn't refuse. Wei Wei Bai's resistance was futile. The light in her eyes dimmed, and she couldn't help but cry. When he kissed her tears, a trace of pain flashed in his eyes. But more than that, there was a dark desire to plunder. His hand had already grabbed her belt. Just as he was about to pull it away, his fingers suddenly felt weak. He shook his head, but he felt dizzy. Wei Wei Bai, who thought she couldn't escape, reached out to the system in despair. What do I do, system? My secret is about to be exposed. The system, nibbling on melon seeds, said, Isn't it better if it's exposed? The favorability will definitely increase. Wei Wei Bai said, If I'm exposed as a man, Xie Yunting won't think that I like him. I can't take the risk. She was a man, and she swore to die, but he could still imagine that she liked him 4 times. If she was a woman and struggled with all her might, he might think that she was playing hard to get. She might say that she didn't want to, but her body was very honest. Then she would be struck to death by lightning. This secret couldn't be exposed like this. The system was very calm. Yes, my condolences. Let's deal with this first, then we can think about the future. It had been a few planes, but it had never seen a scene that was not suitable for children. Not only was she broke, she couldn't even get a benefit. It wanted to go on strike. Wei Weibai said, "Actually, this is a small matter. I'm most afraid that Thief Xie is bent to the point that he can't straighten out. When he sees that I'm a woman, he'll immediately lose interest, and the favorability will suddenly fall into the negatives." The system said, "That makes sense." After Wei Weibai finished talking with the system, she found that Xie Yunting's actions had paused for a long time. His hand was on her thigh, and he didn't touch her. One touch, and she would be exposed. Why didn't he touch it? Wei Weibai fixed her eyes on him, but found that Xie Yunting's eyes were unusually cold and vicious as he glared at her. "What drug did you give me?" Wei Weibai thought that he was going to ask why he missed her so much again, so she didn't say the words aphrodisiac. She also realized that something was wrong with her. He couldn't move. His entire body was limp. She and Xie Yunting stood side by side, staring at each other. Suddenly, someone quietly approached. Xie Yunting couldn't move, but his face was full of killing intent. The curtains of the bed were lifted, and Gao Jixiang's old face appeared. "Your Majesty, you've suffered," he cried as he pushed Xie Yunting away, and picked up the little master who was about to be squashed. Wei Weibai glared at him. Damn. Her trusted eunuch turned out to be a master of drugging. She never expected this. Gao Jixiang wiped his tears and helped Wei Weibai put on the coat. Minister Chun said that Thief Xie has bad intentions towards the emperor and will definitely come tonight. So this old servant lit the bone-softening incense. Chen Shangshu? Chen Jingji. She had almost forgotten about this cannon fodder passerby. After Gao Jixiang dressed her, he gave her the antidote. The antidote still had some time to take effect, but Wei Weibai finally opened her mouth to speak. She softly said, "What else did teacher say? Isn't he in prison?" Gao Jixiang put her on a chair and found a sword. Minister Chun has already secretly contacted the remnants of the imperial family. He just succeeded in breaking out of prison. He wants me to come and save the emperor. Wei Weibai saw him walk to the bed with a sword. "What are you doing?" Gao Jixiang pulled out the sword. "This traitor can't be left alive. After this old servant kills him, this old servant will escape with master. Transmigration system, male god, come here. Transmigration system, male god, come here / transmigration system, male god, come here. Transmigration system, male god, come here. Transmigration system, male god, come here, comma." Chapter 312. Kill him. Where will you get favorability? She immediately said, "Stop." As soon as she said this, she found that her tone was too anxious and looked up. Seeing Xie Yunting lying on the bed, her eyes lit up. He wouldn't imagine that she liked him again, right? The frightened Wei Weibai immediately said with disgust, "Of course we have to kill him. We just find it disgusting to see him die here." Gao Jixiang, "No problem. I'll drag him out and kill him." When Xie Yunting heard the little emperor's words, the emotions in his eyes collapsed, revealing a trace of dark despair. Wei Weibai frowned. "Forget it. Let's go." The sword in Gao Jixiang's hand trembled. "Emperor, if this scourge is not eliminated, he will be a threat to you." Wei Weibai's face changed, her eyes cold. "Of course we know that he has no emperor in his heart. His behavior is improper, and he has... Damn it, we hate him so much that we can't sleep at night." Xie Yunting was powerless, desperately trying to break free from this feeling of powerlessness. His fingertips dug into his palms, bleeding, but he still couldn't move. He listened to the little emperor's words, and even his ears began to ring. A sharp pain constantly tore at his heart. Her eyes were full of disgust. Gao Jixiang didn't understand. "Then it's better to kill him. Wei Wei Bai smiled bitterly. But no matter how much we hate him, we have to admit that he is a good person. He is a good person? A good person. Xie Yunting. His hands are covered in blood. How is he a good person? Wei Wei Bai sighed softly. Her hands and feet could barely move, and she struggled to walk to the bedside. On the bed, Xie Yunting was lying horizontally, his handsome face full of unwillingness and struggle. His eyes were very deep, and his anger made him look desperate and crazy. Wei Wei Bai looked at him, her eyes calm, without disgust. We once saw you in high spirits, the scene of high school, and admired you endlessly. Then we saw you have a bright future, and we were happy. Her tone was too flat. He didn't give anyone a chance to think. It was as if these few words were just a conclusion without any emotion. But that kind of joy is not something as filthy as yours. Xie Yunting suddenly didn't want to hear her words. He would rather she hated him to death than see him as a stranger. Wei Wei Bai, but even at this point, I know that you are still a person who can sympathize with the people. Otherwise, you wouldn't have waited so long to force the abdication just to avoid war. As long as you care about the people and have righteousness in your heart, you are an excellent person. Xie Yunting opened his mouth, but no sound came out. The little emperor stood in the light with an indifferent expression and clear eyes. Xie Yunting, we will not kill you today. She then said to Gao Jixiang, bring me a pen and paper. Although Gao Jixiang didn't understand, he still took it. Wei Wei Bai wrote the abdication edict and placed it on the table. The throne is yours. Zhen, no, I'm leaving. You're more capable than me. Be a good emperor. Finished speaking, she turned and walked out with Gao Jixiang's help. Xie Yunting's throat made a hoarse sound, and he finally said, don't go. Even the throne couldn't keep her. Why did he think that his words could keep her? Wei Wei Bai's footsteps paused. Xie Yunting was even more heartbroken. His voice was small and pitiful. Don't go. But she didn't stay, and walked out without hesitation. Outside, the thunderstorm was raging. Soon, her footsteps were covered by the sound of the thunderstorm. Xie Yunting stared blankly at the open door. She had already disappeared outside. His heart was also empty. He suddenly felt a little cold on his face. He didn't know when the tears started to fall. Chapter 313. Wei Wei Bai followed Gao Jixiang out of the palace through the secret passage. When they left the palace, they saw a carriage parked on the path. Chun Jingji was waiting there with a lantern. When he saw the little emperor rushing over, he immediately stepped forward and bowed. This official greets the emperor. Wei Wei Bai weakly said, you may dispense with the formalities. Chun Jingji immediately stood up and said, let's go, emperor. Wei Wei Bai nodded, but suddenly staggered a few steps. She really couldn't stand still. The cartilage incense was more powerful than she imagined. Even if she ate the antidote, she wouldn't be able to recover. Chun Jingji was shocked and reached out to hold her. Once in his arms, it was like hugging a cloud. He could even smell the unique fragrance of her body and Xie Yunting's scent. He took a deep breath. Although he already guessed, when the truth was in front of him, his heart still surged with anger. This was the emperor. No matter how poor she was, she couldn't tolerate being humiliated. Xie Yunting, that traitor, was simply crazy. Because he was too shocked and distressed, Wei Wei Bai's seductive temperament was completely ignored by him. Chun Jingji's heart was free of distracting thoughts. He hugged her and put her in the carriage. Wei Wei Bai weakly said, thank you, teacher. Chun Jingji said, this is what this official should do. Gao Jixiang also took the opportunity to get in the carriage. Okay, let's go. The cartilage incense can't hold that person for too long. Chun Jingji personally drove the carriage. Okay. The carriage immediately drove into the night, disappearing in the blink of an eye. Chun Jingji, who was driving the carriage, gripped the reins tightly, his fingertips still stained with blood. It was on Wei Wei Bai's body, above her pants. Xie Yunting, that madman, to humiliate the emperor so crudely, she even bled. Chun Jingji wanted to find some ointment to apply it on her, but then he thought that she might not want people to know about this shameful thing. For a moment, Chun Jingji felt very conflicted. In the carriage, Wei Wei Bai said to the system, Why did my period come? The system replied, you're a girl. Of course you have a period. Wei Bai, why are you only here now? She had been living leisurely in this plane for almost 3 months. Because she was so relaxed, she forgot that her period had never come. The system replied, because this is the first period. Wei Bai, Minarchy came at 16? The system said, strapping. This was a very good reason. Wei Bai was silent for a while before saying, I don't have any sanitary pads. Was she going to bleed all the way to her period? The system replied, yes. Wei Bai, aren't you a system? Why didn't you conjure up a sanitary pad for me? The system rummaged through its inventory and finally sighed. I'm so poor. Buying a Sophie for daily use and adding the Spacetime Express would cost 15 days of life points. I'm so poor that I can't afford it. 15 life points. Wei Bai said that she was indeed abnormally poor. She would rather use toilet paper than spend 15 days of life points. Gao Jixiang suddenly realized his little master's predicament. He was very sure that Xie Yunting hadn't succeeded yet. Master, are you having your period? Wei Bai nodded reservedly. Gao Jixiang immediately opened the curtain and said to Chen Jingji, there's an inn in front. Let's stop for a while. I have something to do. Chen Jingji thought, is the wound on your butt very serious? He nodded and then rushed to the inn in a hurry. He was afraid that Wei Bai's butt would split open. Wei Bai thought, it's so different to have a considerate person by your side. Gao Jixiang had experienced all kinds of strange things in the palace. He tried his best to get a woman's cotton cloth, which was filled with clean plant ash. Chapter 314. She also brought a young girl's coarse dress. After Wei finished bathing and finished everything, she gracefully walked out of the inn's door. Chen Jingji was still worried about the emperor's wound. As soon as he looked up, he saw a beautiful woman walking towards him. Chen Jingji felt like his heart had been hit by something, jumping up and down. The beautiful woman walked in front of him, smiling sweetly, her pink cheeks red. She gently bowed towards him. Teacher, I've been waiting for a long time. Chen Jingji stuttered. Teacher? He had only ever been a teacher to one person, and that was the emperor. Wei Bai smiled sweetly. Teacher, I think a carriage full of men is too big of a target. So how about you and I pretend to be brother and sister? Chen Jingji was shocked. Brother and sister? Wei Bai, brother? Chen Jingji's brain rumbled, and he staggered a few steps. Blood rushed to his head, and he couldn't hold on. When he got on the carriage, Chen Jingji was still dizzy. Even the carriage was staggering as if he was drunk. The system was at a loss for words. This is not the objective. She had the temperament of an aphrodisiac, and yet she still casually flirted with people. This was a crime. Wei Bai's face was full of vicissitudes. What else can I do? I don't know how to get the 25 points, so I can only rely on external forces. System, you want to cheat on him? Wei Bai, I don't know if I cheat on him or not, but I've already gotten to this point. Xie Bent definitely won't think that I like him, so I can't fail at the final step. She thought it would be easy to get favorability in this plane. But because of this ridiculous side mission, it was even harder than the eunuch showing off his masculinity. Show a bit of liking, and Xie Yunting would think that she liked him. She would be struck by lightning. But if she didn't obey, it would be hard to get favorability from Xie Yunting. Once the 6 months were up, she would die. Wei Bai expressed that she had never seen such a shameless mission. In the end, she sighed. So now we can only rely on our sense of crisis to fish for Xie Yunting's favorability. So does the host want to have a threesome? The system silently bought another tub of ice cream. The melodramatic drama was too magical, so it expressed that it needed some snacks to calm down. Grand Tutor, we found the abandoned carriage. It should have taken the waterway, but we don't know if it went south or north. The person who was sent to investigate said while trembling on his knees. Xie Yunting touched the edict. On it was the little emperor's familiar handwriting. His face was expressionless, but his eyes were incomparably cold. It doesn't matter if they're heading south or north. Investigate everything. If you don't have enough people, transfer them. Don't let them run away. Yes, Grand Tutor, the people below answered cautiously. They were afraid that the Grand Tutor would go crazy again. It was said that there were several waves of people who were investigating. They were all beaten to death by the Grand Tutor because they couldn't find anything. During this period of time, the Grand Tutor was especially cruel and vicious. Xia Yunting arranged an inescapable net, frantically searching for traces of the little emperor. During this period of time, he had barely closed his eyes, and he didn't dare to. As soon as he closed his eyes, he saw the little emperor's beautiful but emotionless face. She hated him. Xia Yunting only found out after she left that she hated him so much. She clearly knew what he was thinking, but she still indulged him step by step into the abyss of love. Then she looked on coldly. Was there anything more cruel in this world? How ruthless was she to be able to do this? Xia Yunting walked into the little emperor's palace with a splitting headache. The leak in the palace was repaired, and it was more comfortable and warm. He was afraid that she would be uncomfortable, but as soon as she left, he smashed the palace. Within 2 days, he regretted it and personally supervised the restoration of the palace. Below to record the reading record. Chapter 3:15. Xia Yunting walked into the palace. The letters on the desk were still unopened. He put the abdication edict on the table. After a long silence, he began to open the letters. He had been gone for 10 days, but sent 20 letters. Because it was the first time he had written a letter with that kind of thought. Xia Yunting, who faced any kind of thrilling situation, had sweated his palms when he first picked up the pen. There were clearly thousands of words to say, but the words written at the end of the pen were just some trivial matters. For example, asking her how the weather was the meal delicious? If she liked something, he could bring it back. At that time, just writing a letter made him feel like his heart was overflowing with tenderness. But now, he realized that the letters he had written were actually a kind of implicit confession. Unfortunately, the little emperor didn't even look at them. Xia Yunting opened the letters and threw them into the brazier to burn them. In the end, there was only the abdication edict left. He looked at the edict coldly. He suddenly sneered. "You want me to be a good emperor, I won't." Before, he thought about it day and night, but now he was disheartened. He threw the edict that everyone dreamed of into the fire. "By way, the throne is still yours," he said coldly. "So don't even think about escaping. Even if I have to tie you up, I will tie you to this position." He was a powerful minister. She was a weak ruler. Binding her to the throne, he would make sure she couldn't go anywhere. Just thinking about how after catching her, he would trap her in the palace. She could only watch him day and night. Xia Yunting felt his heart full of tenderness turn into a violent possessiveness. This kind of possessiveness, the feeling was actually not bad. Xia Yunting laughed sinisterly. Ding! The male lead's favorability has increased to 80. His trusted eunuch suddenly came over with a face full of joy. "Tai Fu, we found the emperor's trail." Xia Yunting suddenly stood up, his voice cold as ice. "Let's go and welcome the emperor back to the palace." This time she was caught. Even if she was tied up with a golden chain, she wouldn't be allowed to leave. At this time, Wei Bai, who was far away on the horizon, heard the warning of the favorability. She didn't know why, but she felt cold all over. This increase in favorability was inexplicable. She had already run away, but Xia Yunting didn't go crazy and actually increased his favorability. He had a feeling that something bad was going to happen. She calculated the time and felt that she still had a few more days of freedom. Therefore, he had no qualms about continuing to eat and wait for death. A few days later, even the system couldn't bear to watch any longer. "Host, our days have been ruined by you. Are we going to start work?" Wei Bai, "I don't want to work. I just want to be a parasite of society." The system said, "Me too. Tui, you better pull yourself together. Wait, the male lead is here." Wei Bai picked up a camellia and put it in her hair. "Then let's get started." The days passed leisurely. After a few months, winter had just passed and spring had arrived. Chun Jingji was weaving a rope. He found that there was a cliff nearby. After using the rope to go down, he could see a small path leading out. Xia Yunting had blocked the main road, so they could only escape via the smaller roads. Suddenly, a fragrant handkerchief gently wiped away the sweat on his forehead. Chan Jingji trembled. not daring to look up at the beautiful girl in front of him. His heart beat violently. Wei Wei Bai sweetly called, "Brother, are you tired?" With this call, Chun Jingji only felt that his soul had flown away. Suddenly, a horse neighed, and the two people looked up in fright. Not far away, an army appeared. Xia Yunting sat on the horse at the front, a pair of dark eyes gloomily looking at them. In those eyes, there was a murderous aura. So the little emperor ran away just to elope with this man? What righteousness of the world! It was just an excuse for her red apricot tree. Slash button at the bottom to record the reading record. Chapter 316. And the little emperor even dressed as a woman, traveling with Chan Jingji. Xia Yunting's eyes were red with hate. She dared to dress as a woman for this man. Xia Yunting only felt his head hurt, and his chest spasmed. He fiercely snatched a bow from the soldier next to him, quickly knocked an arrow, and aimed at Chen Jingji. Kill him. Xia Yunting's head was full of this thought. The arrow was still in his hand. Wei Wei Bai's face changed. She threw herself into Chen Jingji's arms, protecting him, her back facing the arrow. Xia Yunting's fingers trembled, almost releasing the arrow. He quickly loosened his grip, his cold face full of anger. Bai Wei, what are you doing? Chun Jingji was also stunned. His whole body was held by Wei Wei Bai, her soft and weak body sticking to him, making him feel as if his soul was separated. Wei Wei Bai hugged Chen Jingji, her emotions brewing. Tears filled her eyes, moist and pitiful. Then she turned back, her face full of determination. Xia Yunting, I already abdicated to you. Why are you still so ruthless towards us? How could Xia Yunting hear her words? His eyes were full of the image of her hugging another man. Us? Didn't you say that you hated gay men the most? Then what do you mean by dressing as a woman and being together with this good-for-nothing? Xia Yunting's anger was full of bitterness. Facing him, she hated gay men. But facing Chen Jingji, she was even willing to dress as a woman. She was stabbing at his heart. Wei Wei Bai sneered, her face full of stubbornness. She said word by word, "True love is not divided by gender. I love him as a person, not as a gender. This is not gay. It's because I have no other choice." Chun Jingji was stunned. You have no other choice? Wait, what was true love? What was not divided by gender? What was that? He and the little emperor were not fleeing normally. Even their words were not polite. Although he had some thoughts, he hadn't put them into action yet. And then they fell in love? This love came too quickly, causing him to be in a mess. Wei Wei Bai turned around and held his face affectionately. Jingji, you refused to admit defeat in the face of power for me, and now you're in prison. Chun Jingji, his family has been loyal for generations. He's foolishly loyal because of his good upbringing. Wei Wei Bai's tears fell. And for me, you even gave up everything to escape from prison. Just to save me, you were willing to go on the run with me and live a simple life. Chun Jingji, it can't be helped. If he didn't break out of prison, he'd still be waiting for death. So, he saved her and ran away. Wei Wei Bai's face was full of tears. She was in despair. No matter how many obstacles there are, they can't stop us from being together. I'm also willing to give up the throne and be with you. Chun Jingji was shocked. You're already a puppet. It doesn't seem to make a difference whether you give up the throne or not. Xia Yunting looked at them, feeling his muscles tremble. The fire of jealousy in his chest burned him painfully. You actually fell in love with him? With Chen Jingji? This sentence was squeezed out from between his teeth, and blood came out from his clenched teeth. Wei Wei Bai was deeply sorrowful. Xia Yunting, just let us go. The world is already yours. You can have anything you want. Why do you have to keep chasing after us? Xia Yunting had never been in such a difficult situation. He wanted to run away so badly. I want the world. What's the use? The rest of his words were stuck in his throat, and he didn't dare to say it. The little emperor looked at him with a calm and disgusted expression, looking at Chun Jingji's eyes, affectionate and gentle. For the first time, he tasted the feeling of having his heart dug out. Chapter 317. Then he heard Wei Wei Bai's voice again, piercing his broken heart like an arrow. Moreover, Jingji and I have been in love for a long time. I love him, Xie Yunting. I love him. I love him. He deserves to die. Xie Yunting finally couldn't bear it. He felt his hair turn green. He reached for his sword and quickly jumped off the horse, rushing to Wei Wei Bai in a few steps. Get out of the way. Wei Wei Bai stubbornly protected Chen Jingji, angrily looking at him. Xie Yunting, what are you doing? Xie Yunting raised his sword, looking at the dog couple in front of him. He coldly said, Are you going to protect this waste? If you don't get out of the way, I'll kill you too. Wei Wei Bai was afraid, but she summoned her courage. You don't understand that loving someone is not worth your life. Xie Yunting sorrowfully smiled. Ha, I'd rather not understand what it's like to love someone. How could she so stubbornly step on his sore spot? He was so low that he was in the dust, but she still mercilessly stepped on him. Get out of the way. Wei Wei Bai's face was white. You might as well kill me too. Xie Yunting only felt his reason completely collapse. He suddenly reached out and grabbed her, pushing her to the side. Then he raised his sword and plunged it into Chen Jingji's chest. Before the tip of the sword could touch Chen Jingji, the sword was caught in two hands. The blade was covered in blood. Xie Yunting's pupils constricted. He gasped in shock, the sword in his hand falling. Wei Wei Bai's hands were covered in blood. She was like a person forced into a dead end. Her eyes were filled with anger, a desolate beauty. Xie Yunting, if you kill him, you'll take my life. Xie Yunting's body stiffened. He was full of jealousy, madness, cruelty, and ruthlessness under her eyes, unable to vent. He was wrong. The good-for-nothing was not Chen Jingji. It should be him. At this point, he was humiliated like a stray dog. He was still soft-hearted to her. Come here, Bai Wei. His voice was cold and hard, but there was a trace of desperation in it. Wei Wei Bai took a few steps back and looked at him with disgust and fear. Xie Yunting looked at the blood on her palm, which was still flowing out. He knew the wound was deep and couldn't be delayed. He couldn't help but soften his tone. I won't kill Chen Jingji. Wei Wei Bai heaved a sigh of relief. Her relieved expression stimulated him. Xie Yunting rushed forward, ignoring Wei Wei Bai's struggles. He suddenly pulled her into his arms, then tore off his own robe and bandaged the wound on her palm to stop the bleeding. Then, he turned around and ordered, Arrest them all. The soldiers, who were like a backdrop, immediately moved and grabbed Gao Jixiang and Chen Jingji, who was in a daze from the beginning to the end. Xie Yunting had already mounted his horse with Wei Wei Bai in his arms. He led the imperial physician to the relay station in front of him. He was afraid that the little emperor's body was weak and wouldn't be used to the outside life and would get sick. So when he rushed day and night to catch her, he didn't forget to bring the imperial physician. The horse jolted. Wei Wei Bai struggled to maintain a desperate expression. Xie Yunting's eyes were red. He exploded in anger. Shut up. One more word and I'll cut Chen Jingji into 1,000 pieces. Wei Wei Bai immediately became obedient and didn't dare to make a sound. But this obedience made Xie Yunting feel even more heart-rending pain. For Chen Jingji, she was able to retreat to this point. Did she love him that much? What was so good about Chen Jingji? His fame wasn't as good as his ability wasn't as good as his, and even his handsomeness wasn't as good as his. He was just a loser under his hands. Why did the little emperor favor him so much? Transmigration system, male god, come here. / transmigration system, male god, come here. Read the full text. / transmigration system, male god, come here. Download the full text. Transmigration system, male god, come here. Read the full text. Transmigration system, male god, come here, comma. Chapter 318. Chen Jingji did not understand. Your Majesty, she loves me? How could he not know? When did this happen? Gao Jixiang's old face was unusually deep. He thought for a moment before shaking his head. No, Chen Jingji was not an idiot. He trembled. I think so too. Her Majesty doesn't love me. Nothing happened between us. The little emperor had been polite and lazy with him during this time. He was no different from Gao Jixiang. He was just someone who took care of her. He knew himself well enough. But why does the emperor have to act like she loves me? Gao Jixiang was confused, but he looked at Qin Jingji and said seriously, Her Majesty must have her own considerations. You are an official, so you should share the burden of the emperor. Qin Jingji hesitated. I have to act like I love the emperor too? To be such a loyal subject, he was probably the first person in history to do so. Gao Jixiang said, Do you still need to act? Qin Jingji was stunned. He suddenly blushed and awkwardly turned away from Gao Jixiang. Gao Jixiang said, Young man, don't fall for it. Qin Jingji did not dare to say anything. He blushed even harder. Your Majesty, she's a girl, he suddenly said softly. He was not blind. She had been wearing female clothes all this time. That sweet smile, she could not be a man. Gao Jixiang said, You won't be loyal if she's a girl? Qin Jingji was silent for a while before saying, I was loyal before because of loyalty and etiquette. Now I'm loyal, but I have no choice. He had no choice but to be devoted. In the relay station, the system was holding an ice cream bucket. It felt like its worldview had been shattered. The host suddenly hugged a random passerby and acted out an abusive love drama. It was scared out of its wits. Wei Wei Bai quietly reached out her hands and bandaged them for the imperial doctor. She said to the system, I have no choice. I can't hug Gao Jixiang like I'm dying. Although I don't mind, the acting effect won't be good. The system said, Fuck, the pace is too fast. My IQ can't keep up. Wei Wei Bai, there's no other way. I have to find a proper reason to openly seduce Xie Yunting. The system asked, A legitimate reason? Wei Wei Bai, for example, my lover was locked up by Xie Yunting. He used my lover to threaten me to take off my clothes or something. I finally dared to take them off without fear of him imagining that I like him. In the future, she would do anything to please or seduce him. Xie Yunting would only think that she did it for Qin Jingji. He wouldn't think that she liked him. If he didn't do something big, how would he get the favorable impression points? Host, how is this serious? Host, where is your purity? Don't fall. Wake up. Wei Wei Bai suddenly frowned. The wound hurt unexpectedly. Xie Yunting immediately glared at the imperial physician. Why are you using so much force? Do you want to kill the emperor? The imperial physician was frightened and became even more cautious. Wei Wei Bai frowned and looked at him. Xie Yunting's face was malicious, and he didn't look her in the eye. After the wound was bandaged, Xie Yunting silently stuffed Wei Wei Bai into the luxurious carriage. Then he got into the carriage and personally guarded her. The carriage moved forward. Wei Wei Bai's hair was scattered, and there was a camellia flower in her hair. It was gorgeous. Xie Yunting thought that this flower was most likely put on her by Qin Jingji and felt it was an eyesore. He reached out and crushed the flower, then threw it away. Wei Wei Bai was frightened and stared at him. Her hair finally loosened, and her long black hair fell over her shoulders. Her small face was spotlessly white, and there was a trace of worry between her eyebrows, giving her a kind of sorrowful charm. Xie Yunting only felt this kind of beauty, so beautiful that it made his heart burn. Was she also like this in front of Qin Jingji? Chapter 319. She was like a person made of snow, a beauty without a trace of flaw. She seemed to be waiting for a response. After struggling a few times, she finally raised her body and softly kissed him. One touch and then parted, not giving Xie Yunting any time to react. Xie Yunting was sluggish for a moment before he reached out and touched his lips. This was the first time she took the initiative to kiss him. He didn't know what to feel, but his heart was in chaos. It jumped so hard that even breathing was difficult. Ding! The male lead's favorability has increased to 85. After Wei Wei Bai kissed him, she immediately bowed her head, her face a little pale. I won't see him, let him go. Her words pulled Xie Yunting back to reality. It was Qin Jingji again. For a Qin Jingji, she could actually lower herself to this point. Before, she wouldn't beg for her life. Now, for a man, she was willing to compromise. Xie Yunting felt his eyes turn red, but it wasn't anger, but a kind of sour embarrassment. Wei Wei Bai's eyes dimmed. She sighed, full of sadness. Xie Yunting couldn't stand her half-dead appearance. You care about him that much? Wei Wei Bai's dim eyes flashed with a soft light. He is a very important person to me. Speaking of Chen Jingji, her eyes were filled with happiness. Xie Yunting was caught off guard and was stuffed with a large amount of poisonous dog food. His heart was poisoned to the point of bleeding. He sneered, but found that his smile was terrifyingly stiff. This was the first time he wanted to kill someone. His words were squeezed out from between his teeth. If you don't run away, he won't die. Wei Wei Bai immediately nodded. I won't go anywhere, really. He knew that she said this because of Chen Jingji, but Xie Yunting sadly found that. Even this sentence could soften his heart. She wouldn't go anywhere. She could only stay by his side. How good. Xie Yunting suddenly reached out and covered her eyes, lowering his head to cover her lips. He didn't want to see the disgust in her eyes. The sweet and soft feeling made him want to go deeper, but he found that her body had stiffened again. After kissing for a while, she almost burned herself. However, she was still as cold and hard as ever. She was even resisting. Xie Yunting smiled bitterly, released her, and then pressed her back into his embrace. There's still a long way to go to the palace. You should sleep first. Seeing her tired expression, he couldn't bear to force her. Wei Wei Bai didn't make a sound, nor did she struggle. She just quietly stayed in his arms. After an unknown amount of time, she was finally tired. She slowly relaxed her body and finally fell asleep in his arms. Xie Yunting held her, listening to her light breathing as she slept. The grief and grievance in his eyes finally appeared. How am I inferior to that trash? I can give you the world. What does he have? A shabby thatched hut? He made you suffer with him. You were obviously the most pampered, but he made you live in a precarious state. How can you suffer like this? Why did you? Xie Yunting muttered to himself for a while, but found himself unable to utter a single word of condemnation. In the end, he had to admit it. He had fallen. He just liked her. He liked her very much. Wei Wei Bai sat in a carriage for several days before finally seeing the palace gates. Chen Jingji and Gao Jixiang were both in prison. Wei Wei Bai's identity was still the same. She was still the emperor. Xie Yunting had no intention of exposing her, but when she returned, she found that the palace had been renovated. It looked more gorgeous, more comfortable. In any case, the best things were stuffed into her palace. The difference was that the bed seemed to be a lot bigger. Moreover, many of the things added were Xie Yunting's. Yes, Xie Yunting moved directly into her palace and lived with her. Download the https://www.sashu.com/ Download the full article https://www.sashu.com// Download the full article https://www.sashu.com. Download the full article https://m.sashu.com. Chapter 320. The palace maids and eunuchs were all Xie Yunting's trusted aides. Although Xie Yunting was cold on the surface, he still cared about Wei Wei Bai's reaction. But she just looked at him coldly, not protesting. Xie Yunting didn't know whether to be relieved or angry. In any case, he could finally tie her up in a place he could reach. Your Majesty, it's time to bathe. The palace maid came up and respectfully said to Wei Wei Bai. Wei Wei Bai nodded, then turned and followed the palace maid to the bathing pool. Xie Yunting, who was reviewing the backlog of memorials to the Li Palace, stopped writing and looked at her leaving figure. His eyes were unreadable. He had been back for 3 days, but she hadn't said a word to him. When she opened her mouth, she asked what was wrong with Chen Jingji. She even cared about that old eunuch. He was annoyed by her, and after threatening her with a few words, she stopped talking. Xie Yunting's chest also hid a set of chains made of special materials used to tie people up. He sometimes thought darkly that he should just keep the little emperor in the palace, tie her to the bed, and she couldn't go anywhere. How good would that be? But these dark thoughts, when he saw the haggard worry on her face, he couldn't help but put them aside. She was back in the palace, and she couldn't run away. He couldn't force her too much. Suddenly, Xie Yunting thought of something. He threw away the brush in his hand and rushed to the bathing pool. Sure enough, he saw a row of palace maids and eunuchs standing by the pool. Even a palace maid was undressing Wei Wei Bai. His eyes immediately turned cold, and he gloomily said, "All of you get out." Whether it was a palace maid or a eunuch, he didn't want her to be seen. The people around him immediately rolled away, leaving no one behind. Leaving behind the half-undressed Bai Weiwei with a blank expression on her face. "What is Tai Fu doing?" Weiwei Bai said expressionlessly. Xie Yunting sneered. "I thought you were mute and didn't remember how to speak," he said as he undressed. Weiwei Bai immediately stepped back in fright, her face ugly. Seeing her like this, Xie Yunting only felt the suppressed anger in his heart about to explode. He raised his eyebrows slightly, his eyes sinister. "This subject heard that the emperor wanted to bathe, so I came to serve the emperor." Weiwei Bai's face turned pale. "No need." Xie Yunting stripped off his clothes and stood naked in front of Weiwei Bai. "There's no need. If it were Chen Jingji, you'd be eager to pounce on him." Jealousy gnawed at his heart day and night, making him look ferocious. Even his words were laced with sarcasm. Weiwei Bai's expression tensed up. "Grand Tutor, please respect yourself." Xie Yunting looked at her coldly, the hatred in his heart growing. He coldly spat out 3 words. "Chen Jingji." As expected, Weiwei Bai looked up. Her eyes were filled with struggle and pain. Then, she took the initiative to take off the rest of her clothes. Her snow-white body exuded a strange allure that was a mixture of innocence and charm. Xie Yunting had been seduced by her when she pretended to be a man. In the end, she turned into a woman. This kind of attraction was 10 times stronger than before. She was the first person who could drive him crazy without doing anything. Xie Yunting felt like he was going to explode. He took several deep breaths, then coldly said, "Bathe." Weiwei Bai immediately fled into the water. Red petals floated on the water, covering her naked body. Because she had a place to hide, she was always relieved. But she didn't know that this kind of looming cover made the heat in Xie Yunting's eyes even more exuberant. Chapter 321. When Xie Yunting entered the water, Weiwei Bai immediately hid in a far corner, unwilling to come over. His expression was unclear as he leaned against the side of the bath, his eyes burning as he looked at her. The two of them, one staring, the other dodging. It was like a confrontation between a beast and its prey. Just when Weiwei Bai thought he couldn't hold back and was about to pounce, he suddenly leaned against the side of the bath, his eyelids drooping, hiding the aggression in his eyes. "When did you and Chen Jingji start dating?" Weiwei Bai didn't understand why he would ask this, but she still answered, "We knew each other when we were young. He is the son of the Prime Minister. I remember the first time I saw him was when I was 6. He was so young, but he had a straight face. I thought this person was really cute." Xie Yunting. "He was even cuter when he was 6. He was so cute that all the servants and elders praised him. In the end, that vicious mistress began to frame him because he was too cute. He was cute enough to make people jealous and frame him. How could Chen Jingji compare to him?" When Weiwei Bai thought of Chen Jingji, her expression softened and her voice became sweet. "Although Jingji looked serious, he was very protective of me. At that time, I was playful and couldn't get down from the tree. He even deliberately reached out to carry me down, but he was too small and couldn't hold me. We rolled down the tree." Speaking to this point, she couldn't help but laugh. Xie Yunting was hit in the heart by her lovely smile. He fiercely glared at her. Chen Jingji, that waste, grew up to be a waste, and as a child, he was also a waste. If it were him, he wouldn't let her fall down the tree. Even if she fell, he would use himself as a cushion to catch her. Weiwei Bai finally relaxed when she talked about her beloved. "When I grew up, father wanted to find a teacher for me. He happened to be the top scorer, so I let him teach me." Xie Yunting was angry and sad. He was also the top scorer and the super top scorer of the Luyuan. Why didn't she choose him? Was it because Chen Jingji became the top scorer a few years earlier than him? Weiwei Bai smiled sweetly. "He taught me many things. We played together, recited poems together, admired the moon and flowers together, drank wine together, and experienced many, many things together. The system flipped through the pages again and again. Fuck. Why couldn't it find a single thing that the host had mentioned? It had clearly done its homework. Chen Jingji and the little emperor didn't know each other at all. When Chen Jingji was a teacher, because he was too strict, he was stabbed by the original owner. The original owner of the body couldn't wait to throw Chen Jingji into the well, so how could he recite a poem? The host was bragging again. The system was expressionless. Wei Wei Bai was still bragging. He's a little shy. I was the one who confessed first. Xie Yunting felt like he was looking for abuse. What did he want to do by bringing up this topic? Besides making himself jealous, what else could he do? He saw the happy smile on her face. Finally, he couldn't hold back his anger and shouted, "That's enough." The smile on Wei Wei Bai's face disappeared, and she shut her mouth. Xie Yunting pushed aside the petals in the water, rushed to her in a few steps, and held her in his arms. He pinched her chin, his eyes full of cold malice. "Emperor, you're wrong. You still have one thing that Chen Jingji hasn't let you experience." Wei Wei Bai frowned in confusion. Xie Yunting had already reached out and pressed her against the edge of the bath. He leaned over and said to her, "He hasn't let you become a real woman." Not waiting for Wei Wei Bai to resist, he rubbed her bright face with his fingers, his expression evil. "Since he's a soft egg and can't let you experience the joy of being a woman, let this minister help you." // To facilitate the next reading, you can click the button at the bottom to record this reading. Chapter 322. Xie Yunting looked him up and down for a while, the jealousy in his eyes more obvious. He didn't have an extra leg or two eyes. Why did the little emperor keep thinking about him? He grabbed the knife in his hand and couldn't help but sneer. "What's the matter, Chindarin? You really are forgetful. Inciting Zhao Wang to rebel, working with the royalists to get you out of prison, and finally abducting the emperor. Which one of these isn't important?" Chen Jingji lowered his eyes and calmly said, "Tai Fu is wrongly accusing this official. This official is in prison. How could he have this ability?" Xie Yunting didn't waste time. He took a stack of letters from the table and threw them into the cell. "This is evidence of Zhao Wang's correspondence with you, and the testimony of several of his confidants." Chen Jingji didn't pay attention to the letters. He looked at Xie Yunting, his eyes unusually calm. "So, are you going to kill me, Tai Fu?" Xie Yunting threw the knife in his hand into the cell, where it fell at Chen Jingji's feet. "I don't just want to kill you. I want to tear you to pieces. But your dog life is still useful, so I'll let you live." Chen Jingji was expressionless, without a trace of emotion. Xie Yunting laughed mockingly. "But you can escape death, but you can't avoid punishment. Castrate yourself." Chen Jingji couldn't help but twitch his mouth. "Castrate myself?" Xie Yunting frowned in disgust. "I originally wanted to scratch your face, but seeing your repulsive appearance, there was no value in doing so. So I settled for the next best thing and cut off your dirty thing." Chen Jingji. "Dirty thing? Only I have dirty things. You don't?" Xie Yunting looked at him coldly. "Do you want to do it yourself? Or should I have people tie you up like a pig and castrate you in front of everyone?" Chen Jingji suddenly sighed. "Tai Fu, do you know what you look like now?" Xie Yunting looked at him coldly, not responding. Chen Jingji was not affected. He exclaimed, "You look like those jealous concubines who want to frame the legal wife. It's unbearably ugly." Xie Yunting's weakness was ruthlessly stepped on by his words. Chen Jingji was insulting him. But how could Xie Yunting not know that he was a jealous man? He was jealous that Chen Jingji was able to obtain her love, while he was like a dark and vicious demon, desperately trying to break them apart. He stood up, kicked open the cell door, and grabbed Chen Jingji's collar. He lifted him up and gave him a few punches. Chen Jingji was not strong enough to resist. Xie Yunting's eyes were red with jealousy. He kicked Chen Jingji away, but it wasn't enough to vent his anger, so he kicked him several more times. Chen Jingji curled up on the ground. His face was pale as he spat out a mouthful of blood. He stubbornly remained silent and did not beg for mercy. Instead, he chuckled. "Xie Yunting, you should look at your own face. Where is that high-spirited man?" Xie Yunting fiercely said, "Shut up." Chun Jingji said with a mocking smile. You are simply a madman. Even if you kill me, do you think the emperor will like you? Xia Yunting punched him in the stomach. He gloomily looked at Chun Jingji. I told you to shut up. It seems you don't want your own tongue? Chun Jingji's eyes were full of confidence. His mouth was full of blood. You don't dare kill me. Xia Yunting's movements stiffened. He thought of the little emperor. Yes, he killed Chun Jingji. What else could trap her? Chun Jingji coldly sneered. Don't insist on things that don't belong to you. Xia Yunting, you forced the emperor to abdicate his throne and rebel. Are you stupid? // Chapter 323. Xia Yunting only felt his heart being surrounded by a huge sense of powerlessness. He tried to maintain a tough exterior. Do you think you can have her? Chun Jingji was silent for a moment, his eyes flashing with some complex emotions, some struggle and some sweetness. Finally, he accepted his fate and said, We like each other. Isn't that enough? She wanted Xia Yunting to misunderstand that they were together. He could only accept his fate and play along with her. If the monarch wants the minister to die, the minister has no choice but to die. In fact, he was not so foolishly loyal. His previous blind loyalty was because he had a purpose, so he pretended to be so. But now, hey, she didn't want it, but he had to rush forward with his blind loyalty. Xia Yunting saw him like this, and the happiness in his eyes was not fake. His love was not fake. They were really together. Xia Yunting's fingers trembled. He picked up a knife and directly stabbed it into his abdomen. Chun Jingji shuddered in pain. His smile was a bit twisted. You can't have her even if you kill me. Xia Yunting then realized what he had done. He laughed bitterly. You're wrong. I can have her. A person without a heart is also good. Who do you think you are? Do you have the ability to fight with me? Chun Jingji's face was drained of blood, but he was still calm. You're wrong. It's because I didn't fight that you had the opportunity to reach this point. I'm not worse than you, Xia Yunting. Xia Yunting stood up. He looked at him gloomily. What's the point of saying such big words? In any case, you lost. The one in the cell is you, not me. Chun Jingji's face was dark and unclear. He coldly said, The emperor is a woman. Xia Yunting did not look back. So what? Chun Jingji covered his abdomen, his hands covered in blood. He said without trembling, Someone will find out sooner or later. What are you going to do? Xia Yunting's murderous aura soared. I'll kill them one by one. What's so hard about that? Chun Jingji laughed twice, extremely weak. I didn't expect you to be so naive. You forced the abdication to this point. If you don't sit on the throne, you can only wait for internal strife. Those who supported Xia Yunting, which one didn't wait for merit? Only when Xia Yunting became the emperor could those who followed him become the new emperor. If Xia Yunting didn't take the lead, how could the people around him agree? At that time, the one who attacked Wei Wei Bai was Xia Yunting's trusted aide, a loyal hero. Wei Wei Bai had already become a thorn in the side of Xia Yunting's subordinates. Xia Yunting walked out of the cell, glancing back at him. This is my business, you don't need to worry about it. Finished speaking, Xia Yunting went out to instruct a nearby eunuch to call for an imperial physician to treat Chun Jingji. The knife was too short to stab him to death, but the wound was torturous enough. When he returned to the palace, Wei Wei Bai was still asleep. Her eyebrows were tightly knitted together. Her lips were pink and tender, but they had lost their vitality. Xia Yunting was lying on the edge of the bed, looking at her greedily. He reached out to soothe the worry between her brows. Then, he climbed onto the bed and carefully held her in his arms. Their posture was intimate, but there was also a hint of caution. Wei Wei Bai fell asleep without knowing anything. She was soft and warm in his arms, like a fire that didn't burn people. Xia Yunting looked at her in the middle of the night. He only felt his irritable mood gradually calm down. Outside, the dew was heavy. Inside, the room was peaceful. For the first time, Xia Yunting realized what it meant to be peaceful. He belatedly remembered what he had done to her. She had found happiness under him. // Chapter 324. Her reaction was incomparably inexperienced. but beautiful enough to make a person lose their mind. He thought of the marks he left on her snow-white skin. He thought of when she was in love, the color of her body like a rose in full bloom. He finally came to his senses. That guy Qinjingji simply couldn't compare to him. Now that she was in his arms, her happiness was his, her sorrow was also his. He had a lot of time to slowly wear down her heart. And Qinjingji had no power or money and was locked up by him. He didn't let them meet. The distance was too far. The time was too long. He didn't believe that any feelings couldn't be erased. And Qinjingji was wrong. She could only suffer with this waste of a man. When they were together, even if the little emperor wanted to be beautiful, she could only pick the wildflowers in the mountains to decorate. Of course, she was beautiful no matter what she wore. But this also showed that Qinjingji was poor. How could the poor dare to talk about love? Wearing the wild flowers in her beautiful hair was simply degrading the quality of her hair. The little emperor should be held in the palm of his hand. A flower should be carved from the best jade and gold. When wearing clothes, she had to wear the best silk and damask. Concubine? Humph, have you ever heard of a concubine with such power and wealth? He was the main wife. Qinjingji was the poor concubine. And he was a stray dog. He just went to beat a drowning dog, and it was simply dirty his hands. Xia Yunting tenderly stroked her long hair, his eyes burning with hope. I will give you better. No one can compare to me. Bai Weiwei slept oblivious. Perhaps because she was a little numb from sleeping in the same position, she automatically turned in her sleep, her face facing Xia Yunting's chest. Then she instinctively leaned against the warm place, placing her face on his chest and rubbing it. She seemed to feel comfortable and revealed a smile. When she did this, Xia Yunting's entire body was stiff as wood. He didn't dare move, afraid to wake her up. When he was sure that she didn't wake up, he finally couldn't help but reach out to touch her face. Xia Yunting touched the smile on her lips and couldn't help but smile as well. The feeling of happiness came from her chest and from the sound of her breathing, even if there was only a little bit of happiness. But it was enough to make Xia Yunting happy for a long time. Ding! The male lead's favorability is at 87. The system silently watched from the side, looking at the host sleeping like a dead pig, and then looking at Xia Yunting laughing like a silly dog. The host had already tortured the other party into a fool, yet the favorability of the other party still increased. So the male lead was indeed abused into a masochist? When Weiwei Bai woke up the next day, she saw Xia Yunting changing clothes. She leaned against the bed with a tired face, as if she was not interested in anything. Xia Yunting suddenly clapped his hands to have someone come in. A row of palace maids lowered their heads and brought in a pile of things. Palace maid one said, "Your Majesty, this is a white jade flower hairpin inlaid with green jade. Only Your Majesty is worthy of wearing such a beautiful hairpin." Palace maid 2, "Your Majesty, this is a lotus-patterned golden hairpin. This hairpin is breathtakingly beautiful, but it can only match 1/10 of Your Majesty's beauty." Palace maid 3 said, "Your Majesty, this is an 18-layer golden silk robe. When you wear it, you will look like an immortal." Palace maid 4 said, "Your Majesty, this is—" Weiwei Bai immediately raised her hand. "Stop, you salesman. Zhen won't buy it. Get out of here." Xia Yunting finished dressing and was still sorting out his accessories. He grabbed the jade pendant he was going to wear while secretly looking at Weiwei Bai. Early in the morning, he had people bring out the best things for her. The storehouses of the palace were all turned over, just to let the little emperor know the beauty of material things. The result was that the little emperor didn't seem happy. Weiwei Bai turned to look at Xia Yunting. "What do you want to do?" Xia Yunting, "Using gold and silver to corrode your willpower, abandoning the poor Chen dog." Transmigration system, male god, come here. Transmigration system, male god, come here. Transmigration system, male god, come here. And transmigration system, male god, come here and read the at https://m/sashu.com to facilitate your next reading. You can click the button at the bottom to record this reading. Transmigration system, male god, come here, comma. Chapter 325. This sentence almost slipped out of her mouth. Xia Yunting calmed down, then turned to her and said, "Does the emperor not like it?" This official had people choose the best for you. It's definitely better than a wildflower. Wei Wei Bai looked at him, then suddenly smiled coldly. She pointed to those things and said, "These are all women's things. You brought them here to make me abdicate quickly and let you be the emperor?" When Xie Yunting heard this, he didn't even think to refute. "I didn't mean that." "Wei Wei Bai, then what do you mean?" "Right, the abdication edict has been written. You can go out now and announce it to the world, abolishing Zhan, this incapable emperor who deceives the world." Xie Yunting didn't think that these things would stimulate her. He suddenly angrily shouted at the palace maids, "All of you get out and burn those things." The palace maids hugged the things and quickly left. Wei Wei Bai looked on coldly, not saying a word. Xie Yunting couldn't stand this kind of atmosphere. He tried to explain, "I just want you to see some jewelry that women should have." Wei Wei Bai looked at him, her eyes empty. She suddenly smiled sadly. "Xie Yunting, I've never been a woman. I've only worn women's clothes a few times, and they were all for escaping." Xie Yunting's heart tightened. From birth, the little emperor was raised as a man. Wei Wei Bai was sad. "I'm still on the throne. Giving me a pile of women's jewelry is useless, unless you want to abolish me." Xie Yunting couldn't bear to see her so haggard appearance. "The throne is yours, Bai Wei." Wei Wei Bai shook her head. "I can't hide it forever. When the time comes, my body will mature. The difference between men and women is too big. No one is blind." The original owner relied on her young age, and the difference between men and women wasn't that big. She was a woman, so she couldn't be emperor. This dynasty was still a patriarchal society, and there had never been an empress. Once her identity was discovered, even Xie Yunting might not be able to withstand the backlash. She suddenly reached out and grabbed his hand. "Xie Yunting, at that time, I'll probably be dead." Xie Yunting felt his heart twist, and his voice trembled. "No, I won't let anything happen to you. Wei Wei Bai, what can you do? You just want me to fake my death, let me return to my female appearance, and then keep me in the palace as your exclusive property for the rest of my life." Xie Yunting finally couldn't bear it anymore. The darkness in his eyes thickened, and he pulled her back, pushing her into a nearby chair. He lowered his head and trapped her between the chair and his arms. "Listen well, even if you're an exclusive, you're still the noblest exclusive in this world. Even if you're not the emperor, you're still the empress. I won't let anyone surpass you. I'll give you the best, the most beautiful, and the most expensive things in the world." Wei Wei Bai's eyes trembled. Xie Yunting's eyes were like fire, and his expression was frighteningly serious. "So, whether you're the emperor or not, your status won't change. She would always be the first in his heart, no, the only one." Wei Wei Bai finally reacted. She hesitated and said in disbelief, "Xie Yunting, you wouldn't really fall in love with me, right?" Xie Yunting hesitated, and his eyes flashed with a fierce struggle. Finally, he gave up. He lowered his head and placed a soft kiss on her lips. Then he whispered sincerely, "Yes, I fell in love with you." Ding! The male lead's favorability has increased to 92. Transmigration system. Male god, come here. Transmigration system. Male god, come here. // transmigration system. Male god, come here. Transmigration system. Male god, come here. // transmigration system. Male god, come here. Chapter 326. Wei Wei Bai's eyes drooped, her pale face cold without a trace of emotion. She suddenly smiled, her empty eyes suddenly lively, the spring breeze breaking the winter ice, beautiful and alive. But such a beautiful smile. Her words were ruthless. "Xie Yunting, you really disappoint me." Xie Yunting was sluggish for a moment, not knowing what he had done wrong. No matter how powerful a man was, in front of the person he was moved by, he couldn't wait to hold out his whole heart. Even his brain didn't have the slightest bit of intelligence. Wei Wei Bai's fingers gently stroked his eyebrows. "When I first saw you, you were so stunning. Riding a horse through the streets, high-spirited. Later, you became incomparably intelligent, your style unparalleled. Countless followers followed you. In this world, who doesn't admire Taifu? Xie Yunting didn't expect that in her eyes, he would have such a high evaluation. But when she said these words, there was no trace of admiration in her eyes, not giving him the slightest chance to misunderstand. Wei Wei Bai's smile didn't change, but her tone became more serious. But now what's the difference between you and those petty beauties of the boudoir? Xie Yunting, a maiden of the boudoir. Wei Wei Bai withdrew her hand, raised her head, and looked at him coldly. Really a stray dog? You like this? What face do you have to love me? You don't carry out reforms, you don't ascend the throne. You're narrow-minded and short-sighted. Besides circling around me, what else have you done? 10,000 arrows piercing the heart was nothing more than this. His burning heart was kicked to the ground without any defense, and then crushed into powder by her disdain. Wei Wei Bai's face was cold. The Taifu Darren I once worshipped has become like this. It's really disappointing. Now you don't have the qualifications to love me. Xie Yunting stiffened for a moment, then realized what she was saying. He thought he was mentally prepared to face the little emperor's hatred. But when he opened his most vulnerable place to her, being humiliated and mocked by her would still cause him so much pain that he wished he was dead. Xie Yunting retreated a few steps in a daze. He stared at her blankly, but he could only see coldness in her eyes. If I don't deserve to love you, does Chun Jingji deserve it? Wei Wei Bai smiled sweetly. Between me and him, there's no need to talk about being compatible. It was intimate and gentle. She treated him the same as she treated Chen Jingji. One was the filth in the swamp, while the other was the treasure of the heavens. Xie Yunting laughed bitterly. Aren't you afraid that I'll kill Chen Jingji? Wei Wei Bai looked at him coldly. Then I will die with him. We are companions on the road to the underworld. We can meet again in the next life. Xie Yunting was finally provoked by her. He could no longer suppress his grief and madness. He reached out and grabbed her arm. He dragged her to the bed and pushed her onto it. Wei Wei Bai was dizzy from the fall. When she finally sobered up, she looked up, but she saw Xie Yunting's face full of ruthlessness. He walked over with the thin chain in his hand. Wei Wei Bai's face changed. Without thinking, she jumped out of bed to escape. But her movements were not as fast as Xie Yunting. He arrived in front of her and pushed her back onto the bed. Wei Wei Bai crawled into the bed in horror. Xie Yunting, what are you doing? Xie Yunting did not say a word. He reached out and grabbed her white and slender ankles. He dragged her out. She could not struggle. The chain was connected to the shackles. They coldly shackled her ankles. Crossing system, male god, come here. / crossing system, male god, come here. / crossing system, male god, come here. Crossing system, male god, come here. Crossing system, male god, come here. Chapter 327. Just right, it wouldn't make her feel uncomfortable. It had been measured and cast in advance, and the material was not afraid of swords or fire. Without the key, no one could unlock it. After making sure the little emperor was handcuffed, he locked the other end of the chain to the pillar. In this way, she was completely trapped here, unable to go anywhere. Wei Wei Bai looked at the chain on her foot in disbelief, her voice angry. What are you doing? Imprisoning me? Xie Yunting came in front of her, his face full of malice. Without a word, he lowered his head and kissed her. This kiss was fierce and confining, entangling her until she couldn't breathe, her whole body trembling. This kiss was long and torturous. By the time it was over, Wei Wei Bai's face was pale, her eyes shrinking. Xie Yunting also gasped for breath. He carefully stroked her eyebrows, her lips, her collarbone, her skin, her everything. Wei Wei Bai struggled, but couldn't. She began to soften and beg for mercy, but he didn't care. He just stroked her, but didn't take any further action. Wei Wei Bai began to doubt life. In the end, she was about to fall asleep. In the end, Xie Yunting suddenly stopped and hugged her. She belatedly realized that his whole body was trembling. His tears wet her shoulder. He was crying. Wei Wei Bai couldn't help but reach out to pat him on the back, but hesitated, then took it back. Her heart was touched for a moment, but it was just a flash, and then disappeared. She was still calm and rational, and the coldly observing system also let out a sigh of relief and increased the effect of the emotional stripper. Xia Yunting didn't know how long he held her. When he finally had the strength, he got up again, then turned and walked out step by step. His voice was cold and calm, each word like a dripping blade. From today on, you will stay here. You can't go anywhere. You can think of ways to escape, but he had already walked to the door and coldly turned his head. The sunlight outside shone in, clearly illuminating his grave and stern features. But you'll never run away from me. Even if this palace can't trap you, I can still use the heavily guarded palace as a cage. If the palace isn't big enough, then I'll use this world to trap you. Wei Wei Bai felt like she had awakened a lone wolf. No, it was a tyrant. Xia Yunting coldly sneered. Since you don't want my love, as long as I return to being that ambitious leader, then I'll overturn this world for you to see. Wei Wei Bai frowned. What are you doing? Xia Yunting said sarcastically, do what I should have done from the start. Change this country's surname. After saying that, he ignored her and walked out. Then, Wei Wei Bai heard him vaguely instructing someone outside. It was nothing more than strengthening the security and forbidding anyone from entering or leaving the palace. Wei Wei Bai confirmed that Xia Yunting had really left. She laid down, powerlessly saying, I'm tired. Originally, it was a good palace romance drama, but because of that stupid side mission, it became a dog blood drama. My heart is tired, Tong-er. System. Tong-er. Its heart was even more tired. Why are you forcing the male lead to be the emperor? Wei Wei Bai thought deeply for a moment. I just feel that only the emperor is worthy of such a noble me. System. Be serious. Wei Wei Bai. How am I not serious? I'm the emperor. These days, who doesn't pay attention to marriage between families of equal status? Of course the emperor needs to be matched with the emperor. Poor people don't have good endings with rich families. System. So, it's been abused like this. This plot of equal status, how could it have a good ending? / to facilitate your next reading, you can click at the bottom to record this reading. Chapter 328. The following days were more and more difficult to bear. Wei Wei Bai felt that Xia Yunting's eyes were particularly frightening. He moved all the memorials to the palace and told Wei Wei Bai everything. For example, I killed several old officials today. They said they hadn't seen you in a long time and wondered if you had been killed. Wei Wei Bai wore a loose robe, no shoes on her feet, and ankles were tied. She sat in a chair, looking out the window tiredly, as if she had no interest in anything. Xia Yunting didn't care about her reaction. Since that day, his whole person was frighteningly cold. Even when he looked at her, his eyes were cold. Only when he hugged her to sleep would his body soften. A eunuch came and said to Xia Yunting, the person has been brought, Tai Fu. Xia Yunting coldly said, bring him in. The eunuch immediately brought a person in. Wei Wei Bai, who had no interest in anything, finally tensed up. The person brought in was very similar to her. Although there were many differences, but from a distance, the figure and face were at least 80 to 90% similar to her. Xia Yunting saw her looking at the person curiously. I looked for a long time before I found someone similar to you. Of course, he is a man. Wei Wei Bai frowned. You want him to replace me? Xia Yunting was expressionless. He will die in your place. Wei Wei Bai turned to look at him. Die in my place? Xia Yunting's tone was calm. Yes, in 3 days, I will kill you with my own hands, and then ascend the throne, and confer the title of Empress. As long as it wasn't for love, he was still the man who would do anything to achieve his goals, and his actions were swift and decisive. In just a few days, he had already prepared everything. Wei Wei Bai smiled bitterly. She wanted to say something, but in the end she sighed, knowing that she was powerless to reverse the situation. Then she looked at the boy who was similar to her. The boy's face was a little pale. Although he was afraid, he didn't make a sound. He seemed to know that struggling was useless. She looked at him for a while and was about to say something. Xia Yunting threw down his pen. What are you still standing here for? Get out. The eunuch immediately left with his men. During this period of time, The people in the palace were living in an abyss of suffering. The Grand Tutor had a bad temper every day. Xia Yunting didn't look at Wei Wei Bai, fearing that he would see mockery and ridicule on her face. He was still fed up with the feeling of his heart being trampled on. Therefore, he would not reveal his feelings. Even if he was jealous of the substitute just now, he could let her take a few more glances at him. Xia Yunting himself was having a hard time, and he didn't want Wei Wei Bai to have a good time either. He added, Chun Jingji will also participate in our coronation ceremony, but as a prisoner, Wei Wei Bai's face turned pale. She clenched her fists but didn't say anything. Seeing her like this, Xia Yunting snorted coldly. 3 days passed just like that. The system reminded him, it's almost time. Wei Wei Bai was dragged by someone to put on her clothes. It's okay. I'm sure I can finish brushing up on my favorability points. After putting on her clothes, she leisurely walked out. Xia Yunting, who was standing outside, saw her at a glance. This wasn't the first time he saw her in women's clothing, but today was different. She was wearing the Empress auspicious dress. The red dragon and phoenix robe swayed with her steps. Her figure was graceful, and her every move was refined and noble. Her face was indifferent. Under her slender eyelashes, her eyes were as clear as glass, beautiful and brilliant. His heart thumped. Xia Yunting only felt like he was a thief who had stolen a pearl. He was terrified, but rejoiced. This person was his. Ding! The male lead's favorability has increased to 95. Read the full text. / Download the full text. Read the full text. Chapter 329. Xia Yunting still hadn't put on the emperor's robes because he still had something to do. Zhao Wang was already dead. The military power had fallen into his hands. The court had been purged from top to bottom, and the people of the world, because the previous emperor was mediocre and useless, and he was addicted to women, causing the people to have no way to make a living. As for Xia Yunting taking the throne, no one protested. The dynasty had declined to this point. Xia Yunting was like a savior. If it weren't for Wei Wei Bai, he might have already taken the throne. He took Wei Wei Bai's hand. From today on, there will no longer be a person called by Wei in this world. You will no longer be the emperor, you will only be my wife, and also the new empress. Wei Wei Bai's fingers were cold, and even her eyes were cold. She was silent. Xia Yunting's heart was bitter. He would rather hate him, curse him, than see her like this. Wait for me. I'll come pick you up later. Wei Wei Bai turned to leave and suddenly said, How long do you want to tie me up? She moved her foot, and the sound of the chain was heard. Xia Yunting's footsteps slowed. His heart was still a bit uneasy, but thinking that she couldn't escape, he walked back. He reached out and picked her up, placing her in a chair. Then he bent down and lifted her foot, taking out the key to unlock the shackles. With the shackles removed, Wei Wei Bai let out a sigh of relief. Xia Yunting held the chain, softly saying, If you still run, I will still chain you. Wei Wei Bai suddenly lifted her foot, kicking him in the chest. Scram! You traitor! Xia Yunting didn't dodge, forcibly taking her foot. His eyes were still affectionate. You can beat or scold me as long as you like. Saying this, he stared at her. After seeing enough, he got up and walked out again. The system was silent for a moment, then said, From gay to masochist, host really didn't have it easy. Wei Wei Bai, did you go far? System, N. Wei Wei Bai endured the pain and said, Can it be cheaper? 3 days. 3 days for a small packet of powder? The system sighed. Your level is too low. If it weren't for the discount, you wouldn't even have the right to buy the ecstasy potion. Wei Wei Bai said, Forget it, just sprinkle it. She had no power or influence now, and Chun Jingji had no time to fight with Xia Yunting, so he couldn't help. As long as there was the slightest possibility of saving herself, she would not ask for help from the system. The system sprinkled the bewitching drug, and all the people in the palace who were looking at her collapsed one by one. Wei Wei Bai immediately walked out. Along the way, she served whoever she met with a bewitching drug. Without any hindrance, they arrived at the morning court. She saw that on the throne, there was a young man who looked like her. He was wearing the emperor's clothes and was sitting there trembling with fear. There were not many people in the main hall. Once the bewitching drug was used, they all collapsed. Today was a ceremony. Xie Yunting planned to lead the army directly into the palace. Then, he killed the little emperor with a single arrow and crowned himself as emperor. While he was at it, he conferred the title of empress. This was a ceremony that everyone in the world knew about. Xie Yunting had completely rebelled, and the sky had changed. Compared to the beginning, when he planned to wait until she died, then take the abdication edict and take the throne, he was even more decisive, leaving no way out. Wei Wei Bai had long known that Xie Yunting was ruthless. However, it was also unexpected that he would be forced to such a vicious state. When the young man saw her, he said in horror, "Did you come to kill me ahead of time?" The puppet knew from the beginning that he would die without a doubt, but his fear did not diminish in the slightest. Wei Wei Bai shook her head, then suddenly curved her lips into a smile. "Come down and change clothes with us." The young man's face was deathly pale. Change clothes?" Wei Wei Bai nodded, looking at him with a smile, a calm and elegant appearance. To TXT. Chapter 330. Seeing her like this, the young man realized how disgusting his impersonation was. He was not even half as calm as her. He followed her orders and unknowingly changed his clothes with her. Then, Wei Wei Bai sprinkled the aphrodisiac on him and made him lie flat on his back. Wei Wei Bai wore a dragon robe and a crown. A jade bead curtain covered half her face. She sat on the throne with her back straight. Her eyes were indifferent and her face was calm. "Everyone, I'm going to die." The system said, "You've died so many times, are you still not used to it?" Wei Wei Bai sighed, "No, there are still a few days left before the 6 months are up. I'm worried that when I die today, the life guarantee will be activated." If it was not for the countdown, the life guarantee would be activated at any time. Even if it was deducted for a few more days, she would not have to go back. It was all deducted. The system said, "It's very painful. I'm worried you won't be able to take it." Wei Wei Bai said, "I have to take it even if I can't. I'm poor." Poor people were not only not qualified to fall in love, they were not even qualified to be comfortable. The system silently looked at the minimum life support grid and hesitated for a moment before blocking it. The pain of the arrow piercing into the body was too torturous. Without life guarantee, it looked for other options. It looked through the discount section of the store and said perfunctorily, "Okay, it won't activate." Wei Wei Bai smiled. "You're so good to me, system." The system was about to laugh and say, "Who are we?" But Wei Wei Bai's next sentence was, "You're not deducting my life points to secretly buy snacks again, are you?" The system said, "Who are we? Am I that kind of system?" Yes, it was that kind of system. Xie Yunting wore the armor he used to force the abdication. He rode a black horse and led the army into the palace through the open palace gates. His eyebrows were cold, but the bow in his hand was the same bow that Bai Weiwei had used to shoot him under the red plum tree that day. Today was the real beginning of their relationship. Entering the palace, he saw the main hall. The door was open. He rode his horse to the outside of the hall. His eyes were cold as he pulled the bow in his hand. The person sitting inside was the substitute he had found. The soldiers and civil and military officials behind him all saw the person sitting on the throne. The lonely little emperor, wearing a dragon robe and a crown, looked like she was going to be blown away by the wind. Looking from afar, it was indeed the little emperor. Xie Yunting didn't look carefully. He was too far away, and he didn't want to see a face similar to Wei Wei Bai's. He was afraid that he would be soft-hearted and lose his aim. He looked at the other side of the main hall, which was the little emperor's palace. She was wearing the empress's clothes and was sitting inside waiting for him to return. Xie Yunting heard the sound of chains dragging across the ground and looked back. It was Chun Jingji. He was wearing a prisoner's uniform, and his legs were cuffed. His face was somewhat haggard. Xie Yunting smiled and said, "Chun Jingji, you should take a good look. Today is the day I force the palace to kill the emperor, the day I ascend the throne and take my wife." It didn't matter that she didn't like him. No matter how hard he tried, one day he would be able to make her soften her stance. As for Chen Jingji, he would leave him a life, and he would slowly torture him. Xia Yunting expressed that he was such a narrow-minded person who would seek revenge for the smallest flaw. Chen Jingji's wounds hadn't healed yet, and he was dragged here. Based on what he had seen and heard during this time, he speculated and knew what Xia Yunting was going to do. The one on the throne should be a substitute. Chen Jingji looked up. The sunlight illuminated the main hall, making it glorious. And the person sitting on the throne far away, the vague figure, the barely discernible facial features, was like her. Chen Jingji frowned. Although he couldn't see clearly, that distant feeling was very much like Wei Wei Bai's. Chapter 331. Xia Yunting still hadn't looked at the substitute on the throne. He knocked an arrow, aiming at the person on the throne. He was very confident in his archery, so he paid more attention to Chen Jingji. Chen Jingji suddenly opened his mouth. "Where did you find such a similar substitute?" Xia Yunting sneered. "The world is so big, I can always find one." Chen Jingji suddenly took several steps forward, as if he wanted to see who was sitting on the throne. Xia Yunting was angry. Just a substitute, this guy wouldn't let it go. Could it be that Chen Jingji liked anyone who looked like him? Annoyed, he let go of the arrow. The arrow flew through the air, shooting at the person on the throne. Chen Jingji suddenly shouted, "Stop, Xia Yunting." Only now did Xia Yunting truly look over. Following the arrow, he saw the person on the throne in the main hall. The golden color on the ground was dazzling to the eye. She sat upright on the throne, wearing a golden dragon robe, her crown gently swaying. Her face was delicate, her expression indifferent and firm. Where was this a substitute? This was clearly the real thing. Xia Yunting felt as if his heart was being crushed by something. His mind went blank, and he screamed, "Dodge!" The horse also rushed in. He madly chased after the arrow he shot. Faster, faster! He leaned forward, desperately reaching out to grab the arrow's tail. But it was too late. The tip of the arrow pierced through her chest and into her back. Xia Yunting rolled off the horse, scrambling up the steps below the throne. Wei Wei Bai had already fallen from the throne, falling directly into Xia Yunting's arms. Xia Yunting's mind was broken. He held her, not daring to pull the arrow. But the blood couldn't be covered. It seeped through her clothes, a ghastly sight. His face was full of despair. "How did you come out? I shouldn't have let you go. I should have locked you up. I should have locked you up." Wei Wei Bai smiled, powerless and relieved. She opened her mouth, but spat out blood. Her internal organs were shattered, and blood poured out of her windpipe. It was very uncomfortable, but it didn't hurt. Xia Yunting reached out a trembling hand to touch the blood on her lips. "Why? Do you hate me so much? Do you hate me so much? You'd rather die than stay by my side?" Wei Wei Bai's face was pale as blood gushed out of her mouth. "I don't hate you. I never hated you." Xia Yunting's movements paused, staring blankly at her. Her smile was still bright and beautiful, and her eyes were clear and bright. "You're the person I admire the most." These words were like red plum blossoms in winter, but also like flowers in spring. In any case, they were all beautiful, so beautiful that his tears fell madly. Ding! The male lead's favorability is at 98. Xia Yunting's voice was hoarse, his eyes dim to the point of death. His face was full of tears. "If you worship me so much, why don't you love me? Even if you lie to me, I can still give my life to you." She had never been stingy with her kindness. He was like the sun in the sky. His power overturned the world. He was the best in everything. What was wrong with him? Wei Wei Bai's mouth was full of blood, and her face was also covered in blood. She trembled as she reached out to hold his hand. "I love you." Her voice lowered, and she said with a dazed smile. Xia Yunting only felt that his ears were ringing. He was actually hallucinating, but he also felt that this was her pity. Lying to him now, how could she be so cruel? But even if he told himself tens of thousands of times that this was fake, his heart still throbbed. She loved him. Ding! The male lead's favorability is at 100. Mission completed. The male lead felt that you liked him 5 times. The quota has been used up. Because the mission has been completed, he is exempt from punishment. Ding! The countdown to life is 2 minutes. The host is ready to leave this world. Wei Wei Bai felt the feeling of life slipping away again. She tried to pull herself together. If I didn't love you, why would I try so hard to encourage you to usurp the throne? You already have no way out. Whether you abdicate or kill Zhao Wang, you can only wait for death if you don't become emperor. Which minister could be at the peak of his power all his life? Only the emperor could. Wei Wei Bai sighed. I can't love you, Xie Yunting. // Chapter 332. These words were soft and floated helplessly in the air. Xie Yunting was stunned. He grabbed her hand and said foolishly, Why not? I won't force you to abdicate. I won't be the emperor. I'm willing to be a servant at your feet. As long as you love me. Wei Wei Bai smiled, blood overflowing from her mouth. Tai Fu is willing to be a servant. He finally couldn't control himself, and his humble pleas were accompanied by cries. I can do anything for you. You hold on. The doctor is coming. As long as you hold on, I'll be your servant. Wei Wei Bai was so weak that she couldn't see anything. Her body still didn't feel any pain, but the passing of life was not fake. She heard the system's countdown. 10, 9. But I only want Tai Fu to be high above, high-spirited, a life of glory and wealth. When I first saw you, you were the top scorer in high school, riding a horse through the streets, proud of your success. I hid by the railing of a tall building, broke a flower, and threw it at your head. You turned around and smiled at me. 5-4. She used all her strength to raise her head and smile. Really, seeing Tai Fu, I'll miss you for life. She smiled faintly and planted one last kiss on his trembling lips. 1. The host has left the plane, leaving success. The kiss left as soon as it touched. She closed her eyes and softened. Her breath disappeared, and she quietly lay in Xie Yunting's arms. Xie Yunting also stiffened, not daring to move. There were more people around. The doctor also came, but no one dared to come forward. Chun Jingji dragged his leg cuffs and stood to the side, his face pale, but he didn't dare to make a sound. It was as if none of them made a sound. She didn't leave. The air was tense, and the silence was suffocating. Xie Yunting clasped her hand, 10 fingers intertwined, unwilling to separate. He suddenly smiled, and his smile was indescribably mournful and desperate. His tone was as soft as water. I'm not the same. After meeting you, I was doomed. He still remembered the little emperor standing under the white snow and red plum trees, smiling provocatively at him. Those petals flew by, not half as beautiful as she was. At that time, he wondered how there could be such a good-looking person in this world. When Yi Yuxuan opened her eyes, the despair in her eyes was frightening. He stared blankly at the ceiling. He suddenly realized that he was still in a meeting. He had not slept for nearly 3 days. He had been guarding Wei Wei Bai. Because of an important decision, he had to return to the company for a meeting. This was his mission, a simple mission. From the hospital to here, it took him half an hour to drive and an hour to attend a meeting before he finally returned to the hospital. He had only left Wei Wei Bai for 2 hours. Director Yi, do we need to? Yi Yuxuan just closed his eyes to rest for a while. The meeting was coming to an end. When the secretary next to him saw that he had woken up, she was about to ask if the meeting would continue. Yi Yuxuan suddenly stood up. He reached for the suit jacket on the back of the chair. Then, he turned around and walked out. Meeting adjourned. His footsteps were somewhat erratic. His head felt like it was being pounded by a hammer, and his head was splitting. There was a voice in his heart that was desperately calling out, Find her. Find her immediately. But he could not remember that woman's face or name at all. Only her voice was familiar. Her voice had almost never changed. Her speed, intonation, and tone could all change. Only her voice didn't change much. He could even simulate the feeling of her voice every time she spoke in his dream. He drove quickly to the hospital. The scenes in his dream along the way were vivid in his mind. It tore at his heart, and it hurt so much that it was bloody. Chapter 333. The scenes from the dream were vivid in his mind. Tearing at his heart, the pain was bloody. The regent's Little Emperor sequel, when Xie Yunting was 6 years old, he knew what it meant to be sinister. His own mother was drowned alive in the water. He hid in a cave, helplessly watching his mother's body being thrown into the lotus pond. A songstress, no one felt pity for her death. Xie Yunting didn't dare to cry, didn't dare to show his sorrow, because only in this way could the Xie family's matriarch relax her guard. A sad child with eyes full of hatred couldn't live. He began to learn to live humbly. The servant's humiliation, the matriarch's torture, the family's brother's contempt. It was very difficult for him. He climbed up step by step, each step intertwined with humiliation. He swore he would become a person above others. He wouldn't be trampled under anyone's feet. Year after year passed, he finally held power in his hands. Countless people crowded around him and flattered him. There were even many women who wanted to die for him. Xie Yunting, I can die for you. I only ask you to look at me. Xie Yunting didn't bother to look. Death was death. What he hated the most was this kind of person who loved to and fro at the drop of a hat. If they had time to talk about feelings, it was better to fight for power. His mother was also living well. For his father, she was willing to become a songstress just to enter the Xie family. Then, he was killed by someone else, and even caused him to lead such a miserable life. He wanted power, he wanted money, he didn't want feelings. Forcing the abdication was also because he wanted to stand at the top, no longer kneeling to anyone. In any case, the emperor was so stupid, and the women in the harem were each more stupid than the next. From planning to success, he had only been planning for a few years. The crown prince was a shadow that almost didn't exist. Cowardly and without opinions, too lazy to even look at him. The first time he had an impression of her was the day she didn't attend court after ascending the throne. He aggressively threatened her. No matter how noble her status was, she was still afraid to see him. This kind of power, the feeling of being able to need the most noble person in the country. This was what he wanted. He walked into the palace, but she threw herself into his arms. It hurts. She nestled softly in his arms like a cloud. He rubbed as much as he wanted, but his fingers couldn't help but relax. Compromising once, compromising again and again. Then, she really hid in her heart. Xie Yunting even thought that if this person was willing to smile at him, he would be like his pitiful songstress mother, willing to be trampled by her. But even such a humble wish, he couldn't do it. She said that she only wanted him to be high and mighty, high-spirited, and live a life of wealth and splendor. For this, she would rather not love him and risk her life to make him sit on the high seat and not let him down. Xie Yunting felt that what was the use of these things? She was sitting so high up that she couldn't reach him. He might as well go down into the dust and touch the soles of her shoes. How nice would that be? After having her, even power was trash. Chen Jingji entered the palace and saw Xie Yunting coughing as he cleaned Wei Wei Bai's memorial tablet. This memorial tablet was made by Xie Yunting himself. Chen Jingji sneered. I asked the imperial physician, you're depressed in your heart. You reap what you sow, and you're going to die. Xie Yunting foolishly looked at the tablet in his hand, touching her name on it. Then he carefully put it aside. I let you enter the palace because I want to bury me in the tomb after I die. She's been waiting for me for a long time. Chen Jingji said coldly, she doesn't want to see you, and she's still waiting for you? You think too highly of yourself. Xie Yunting didn't feel angry at all. Instead, he was happy to die. Chapter 334. These years, I've done my best to govern this country. How could she not want to see me? Xie Yunting finished, mocking. Who is the one who thinks too much? She clearly had nothing to do with you, and you deliberately made me misunderstand. Chen Jingji couldn't refute, because they really had nothing to do with each other. Xie Yunting lay back on the bed, his face haggard, but his eyes were frighteningly bright. I also want to understand that she always loved me, but she couldn't admit it. I killed her father, her brothers, her family, and forced her to a dead end. At this point, Xie Yunting laughed at himself. How could she love me, love an enemy who took everything from her? So she always resisted, always hated him. Chen Jingji saw him like this, and said in an evil voice, "You really don't deserve her love. She would rather die than let you sit on the throne, because you rode a tiger and couldn't get off. If she was still here, your wolf-like subordinates wouldn't have rebelled." Xia Yunting's breath was weak. "She always worshipped me. How could she look down on me? It's not that I didn't become emperor, but I still governed her country well." She was gone. He was still the regent, her regent for life. The throne was empty, with only a white tablet on the dragon throne. No one dared to sit on it. He sat on the dragon throne next to it, pretending that she was still there. Chun Jingji brought tea, leisurely sitting in the chair and drinking. "If it weren't for my help, you could easily govern. Dream on." Xia Yunting covered the sky with one hand, but he held the leadership of the aristocratic families. At first, he didn't fight because the country was rotten. He was too lazy to fight and let Xia Yunting ruin it. Later, when he wanted to fight, what could Xia Yunting do? If it weren't for her longing for Xia Yunting, Chun Jingji would have fought him to the death. Xia Yunting coldly snorted, but coughed. "Chun Jingji, go to hell, don't drag it out. She's already gone. This illness couldn't be saved." Xia Yunting laughed. I'll go after her." When Xia Yunting died, white snow swirled in the air and red plum blossoms bloomed in the imperial palace. The red plum forest was something he had planted for many years. He was a legend of this dynasty. He had won 6 prizes in a row and succeeded in forcing the emperor to abdicate, but he did not become the emperor. He guarded the little emperor who had passed away and was the regent for his entire life. The later generations were amazed, but no one knew the twists and turns in the story. On the night of Xia Yunting's death, Chun Jingji vomited a large mouthful of heart blood. He sighed sadly. "It doesn't matter if I'm a few years late. I can't catch up to you anyway." A few years later, he fell ill from overwork and died with a yellowed handkerchief in his hand. It was the one she used to wipe his sweat that year. On the way to escape, in a small hut, she wore camellias on her head. Ruru called him brother. Because of the sudden sound of the horse's hooves, the handkerchief in her hand loosened and fell into his embrace. She forgot to take it back, so he hid it for the rest of his life. He wondered if he would be able to return it to her in his next life. When Yi Yuxuan arrived at the hospital, she suddenly stopped in her tracks. He stood in the corridor with some difficulty breathing, not knowing what he was doing for a moment. His heart was still clenched, and cold sweat kept coming out. This feeling was strange yet familiar. His heart ached again and again, for those feelings that had always been absent in his life. But they appeared little by little. He was like an insensible child, at a loss for what to do in the face of these emotions. Suddenly, a familiar voice came from the corner of the corridor. "Where's the phone? I'll call my father to tell him I'm safe, and ask him to help me break off my engagement with that unlucky star." This voice was soft and gentle, just like the woman in his dreams. Titha. Chapter 335. Ding. Strategy successful. Received 1 love point. Wish to extend life by 1 month. -5 days of life support. Used 6 bottles of painkillers. -3 days of life. -5 days of snacks. Remaining 17 days. Please enjoy. The pain of that arrow actually used 6 bottles of painkillers. The last time when she got leukemia, she only used 17 bottles of painkillers, but this time, she used 7 bottles in just a few minutes. No wonder it didn't hurt at all. Wei Wei Bai opened her eyes and saw that she was in the hospital again. She had calmed down. She didn't rush up and scream, nor did she roll off the bed immediately. She needed to talk to the system. "Tell me, you've been using my precious life points to buy snacks. There must be a reason. You're not that insensible, system." The system said, I'm hungry." Wei Wei Bai smiled gently. "If you're hungry, then spend my life points and kill you." The system was silent for a moment, then pulled a tissue and cried, "I need to eat, but the staple food is too expensive. I don't dare to spend too much, so I can only buy snacks. If I don't eat, I'll starve to death." Wei Wei Bai was speechless. The system cried, "What can I do? I can't eat, and you don't even give me snacks. I'm hungry every day." Wei Wei Bai asked, "How much is the staple food?" Crying when eating. Was she the kind of person who abused the system and didn't give it food? The system said, a system university's meal costs 1 month of life points, but 5 days of snacks is enough. Wei Wei Bai said, you eat snacks? Yes, she was the kind of person who didn't give the system food. 1 month of life points was eaten by the system. What was the point of her living? She might as well strangle herself with a noodle. Wei Wei Bai saw the nurse coming and asked. Only then did she know that Bai Changyin was discharged from the hospital without any major problems. Her father seemed to have gone home to get her soup. The nurse said with envy, your boyfriend has been guarding you for 3 days, but he left for a while because he had something to do. Boyfriend? Oh, Yi Yuxuan. Why was he guarding her? Was he waiting to suck her life points? The thief who stole her life points. Shameless bastard. Wei Wei Bai got off the bed to look for her phone. She couldn't help nagging the system when she was in the corridor. Where's the phone? I'll call my father and tell him I'm safe, and ask him to cancel my engagement with that jinx. Their auras were similar. If she got too close to that guy, her pitiful 10 days of life would be gone. The system suddenly said, run. Wei Wei Bai was stunned. She stopped her footsteps. What's wrong? Remember, don't talk to Yi Yuxuan. Don't get close to him. Don't let him touch you. Just run as soon as you see him. Wei Wei Bai Lu was Lu Wei Wei then. She looked up and saw a man walking towards her from the end of the corridor. He was wearing black trousers and a white shirt with a suit jacket in his hand. His footsteps were slightly hurried as he stared at her with his deep, bottomless eyes. A frighteningly tense expression appeared on his handsome face. Wasn't that Yi Yuxuan? Then, she heard a sharp warning sound. Ding. Detected original owner Yi Yuxuan. Energy feedback activated. Forcibly giving a lifespan reward of 17 days. 16 days. Wei Wei Bai's expression changed. What was going on? They were clearly still a few meters away. The system immediately screamed, Wei Wei, hurry up and run. His aura is stronger than last time. You can't beat him. If you don't run, all the rewards I gave you will be given to him. Wei Wei Bai cursed. How could there be such an annoying guy in this world? He was simply her jinx. Crossover system. Adonis, come here. / crossover system. Adonis, come here. / crossover system. Adonis, come here. Crossover system. Adonis, come here. Mobile reading. https://m/sashu.com // Crossover system. Adonis, come here. Ew. Chapter 336. She immediately turned around and ran. Behind him came the sound of a quick chase. Yi Yuxuan felt a burning pain in his heart. He stared at the woman in front of him. Was it her? This was the first time he felt so deeply. Anxiety. He called out a little awkwardly. Wei Wei Bai Wei Wei? This was his fiancée's name, but he rarely saw her and almost never called her name. This name was clearly something that he had thrown into the trash can of his memory, something that he did not even need to look for to study. But after calling it a few times, he actually felt comfortable. After calling her name repeatedly, the burning pain in his body lessened. He then tried to find the words to describe this feeling. It seemed to be joy. He was joyful. Wei Wei Bai, on the other hand, was going crazy. 15 days, 14 days. Damn it. Why is he chasing after me? Didn't he always turn a blind eye to me? She still remembered the first time they met. He looked up at her and waved his hand. Just throw her out. Yes, the first time they met was in his company. Then she was invited by the security guard and thrown out. She thought that because she looked scary, she would die in the light and would not be this bastard's fiancé. In the end, she received a written notice the next day, saying that she passed the interview and officially became his fiancé. Was this an interview? A written notice? So Yi Yuxuan was a workaholic, an emotionless monster. And now this emotionless monster was chasing after her? He even calculated how long it took to walk. Why was he chasing after her? He did not chase before, but now that he should not, he chased after her. She and he were born to be incompatible. Wei Wei. Yi Yuxuan had long legs. One step was several steps for her. He was about to catch up. Wei Wei Bai heard that evil reminder again. 13 days. 12 days. The system said, within 10 meters, your reward will be taken away by him. So hurry up and run away from this distance. Wei Wei Bai screamed, Yi Yuxuan, you jinx, stop chasing me. Her HP was drained away. She was filled with hatred. Yi Yuxuan heard her voice and staggered. She reached out to support herself against the wall of the corridor and watched her escape without hesitation. In his dream, that woman left just like that. Her silhouette faintly resembled that of the person in his dream. He didn't even know how sorrowful his eyes were as he watched her leave. He had experienced this kind of bone-deep despair too many times. He was even a little numb. Suddenly, his footsteps became frantic. She was about to disappear. Qin Xiu held a cup of coffee in his hand and looked at Wei Wei Bai's medical record while drinking. Wei Wei Bai's body was in good condition, and her heart was relatively stable. There wouldn't be many changes in the short term. It was the strange coma that made him study until all his hair fell out. Suddenly, he looked up and saw Yi Yuxuan's face full of grief, running forward in a panic. It was Yi Yuxuan, right? It was that indifferent expression that was actually facial paralysis, deep eyes that were actually dull, elegant steps that were actually as precise as a robot. Yi Yuxuan, right? Qin Xiu was stunned. Hey, Yi Yuxuan? Yi Yuxuan was like a gust of wind. Because he was in the way, she directly used her arm to knock him away. Qin Xiu was knocked against the wall, and the coffee in his hand fell to the ground. He stupidly watched the panic-stricken Yi Yuxuan disappear. Address of the full text: https://www.sashu. Com download of the full text: https://www.sashu.com t. Chapter 337. Then she looked around. Was there a fire or an earthquake? So she needed to escape? No, even if she needed to escape. Yi Yuxuan was also leisurely. I really didn't sleep enough. Even hallucinations appeared. Wei Wei Bai turned a corner and found that Yi Yuxuan didn't chase after her. She immediately covered her chest and leaned against the corridor wall, unable to walk. Her heart was overloaded. She gasped for breath. Damn it, she was going to have a heart attack. Energy feedback mechanism turned off. Deducting 7 days of life. Remaining 10 days of life. Hope the host can cherish it. Wei Wei Bai was very angry. If you want me to cherish it, then don't rob me of my life. The system was alarmed. Yi Yuxuan is catching up again. Wei Wei Bai was frightened. She turned around and saw Yi Yuxuan's spirit appear again. Ding! Energy feedback restarted. 9 days. 8 days. Wei Wei Bai held her head in despair. Yi Yuxuan, don't come over. I have an infectious disease. System, Yi Yuxuan. The scene was awkward for a few seconds. Yi Yuxuan stood in the same place. He stared at her. A pair of calm black eyes were tinged with a trace of vitality. It was like water, but also like hope. Call me again. His eardrums were still trembling slightly. Her voice was so familiar that it made his heart beat faster. Wei Wei Bai retreated and said, Okay, I'll call you. Yi Yuxuan, Yi Yuxuan, Yi Yuxuan, get away. Don't come over. Once you enter the 10-meter range, her life will disappear. Yi Yuxuan didn't leave. Instead, he approached her step by step. His voice revealed a trace of desire. Are you dreaming? Wei Wei Bai retreated and was confused. Who doesn't dream? Everyone dreams when they sleep, scientists say. Yi Yuxuan couldn't help but reach out to grab her. Your dream. Is it the same as me? Before she could finish her sentence, Wei Wei Bai suddenly collapsed. She clutched her heart. She was having a heart attack. The familiar dull pain, the suffocation of being on the verge of death, caused her to tremble in pain. This damn disease. Yi Yuxuan quickly rushed over and hugged her. The softness in his hand stunned him for a few seconds. The feeling was still so similar to the one in his dream. Wei Wei Bai reached out and grabbed his clothes, looking at him ferociously. The familiar voice kept ringing out. Feedback activated. 8 days, 5 days, 0. The system forcibly bestows a newbie gift package. Congratulations to the host for obtaining 3 days of vegetative state life. You will not be affected by reverse nurturing. Bai Changyin had just walked into the corridor with the soup when he saw his daughter fall into the arms of his future son-in-law. His daughter looked at him with hatred, as if she was looking at a murderer. Suddenly, Wei Bai saw Bai Changyin and used the last of her strength to shout, "Dad, I want to break off the engagement." After that, her head tilted and she fell into the familiar darkness. Qin Xiu, who was passing by, happened to hear this sentence. He looked up and saw Yi Yuxuan holding Wei Bai. One fainted with a pale face. The other looked sad and desperate. There was also an old father carrying soup, sluggish at the scene. Qin Xiu, wait, what's going on with this murder scene? Did he miss out on some gossip that was worth hundreds of millions? The soup in Bai Changyin's hand suddenly fell to the ground. He trembled and said, "Yi Yuxuan, what did you do to my daughter? If something happens to my daughter, I won't let you go even if I become a ghost." Yi Yuxuan looked down at Wei Bai, his eyes unable to move. After a long silence, Yi Yuxuan's cold voice finally came. "I'm the one. I won't let her go even if I become a ghost." The Chapter 338. Headache, heartache, soul pain. She looked at the ceiling hopelessly. The system waved a little flag of encouragement. "Host, hang in there. You still have a lot of time." Wei Bai was dejected. "No, I'll just die. What's the point of working so hard on the strategy? I might as well work as a laborer and earn a few $100s a day." So many planes, but not even a day's worth of life points. She even let her own system fall to the point of eating snacks on credit. She was the biggest failure in history, second to none. The system said, "Work hard to accumulate a few more plane strategies, then I can apply for a mission upgrade project for you." Wei Bai laughed. The system said, "How about next time you wake up, just hide and don't come into contact with Yi Yuxuan?" Wei Bai was indifferent and continued to be a salted fish. The system racked its brains. After the mission upgrade, the reward will also be upgraded. You have 6 months of life points. Wei Bai repeated blankly. 6 months? The system nodded. Yes. Wei Bai sat up abruptly. Then why am I still sleeping? Get up and do it. The system let out a sigh of relief. Wei Bai then noticed her situation. The hotel's presidential suite, the double rolling bed. She was lying on the bed, naked, and in the frosted glass bathroom, there was a well-built man, his back facing her as he took a shower. Wei silently stared at the blurred glass, as well as the swaying buttocks inside the glass. So this was her strategy target? The mission target is to obtain So Xian's love. Mission target, So Xian. Time, for months. The memory was also transmitted. Wei Bai's face paled. She reached out to hold her forehead, resisting the discomfort. According to the memory, the man who swayed his butt. His name was Chen Wenfeng, So Xian's archenemy, and her current identity was So Xian's wife. Was she having an affair? Just as she was thinking about this, the bathroom door was pushed open and the man walked out with a towel wrapped around his lower body. His face was handsome, and his eyes were filled with restlessness. He was at least 185 meters tall, and his muscles were well-defined and beautiful. One look, and one could tell that she was an experienced cuckold. "You actually woke up?" Chen Wenfeng said with a smile. Wei Bai had not fully digested the memories, and her expression was a little sluggish. Chen Wenfeng didn't care. After all, Wei Bai was famous for being boring. She was known as an old virgin in the circle. She was already married, but she was still a virgin. What a joke. If it weren't for the fact that he wanted to kick her out of the Su family, he wouldn't have cheated on her. Chen Wenfeng walked to the bed and untied the towel. "It's good that you're awake. Let's do it." He thought that if he said that, Wei Bai would lower her head in fear and shame. She was an old virgin who had never seen a man in her life. In the end, Wei Bai lowered her head and slowly sized up his lower body. Suddenly, the corners of her mouth twitched and she couldn't help but sneer. Chen Wenfeng, was he being mocked? His masculinity was being mocked by a virgin? Chen Wenfeng rushed to the bed and directly held her with both hands. He sneered. "So Xian will be here soon. You better make it sound good, otherwise I'll kill you." Wei Bai finally digested the memories. Her world was called Wei Bai. She was a conservative and boring woman. She married So Xian because of his grandfather's orders. So Xian was so fed up with her that he slammed the door and left on their wedding night, making her a big joke. She was a virgin for 3 years after she married him. So Xian couldn't wait to divorce her, but because of his grandfather's face, he didn't dare to mention it. And Chen Wenfeng's sister had been coveting the position of So Xian's wife for a long time. She instigated her brother to drug Wei Wei Bai and then caused the fact that he cheated on her, so that So Xian had a reason to divorce her. And when she arrived, the original owner was drugged and thrown on the bed. By Wei Wei's side, it was another original owner who was so stupid. She was just about to kick Chen Wenfeng away when the door suddenly opened. A handsome man walked in. His footsteps were casual as his eyes swept over them. It seems that I've disturbed you. Ding. The male lead's favorability is at -30. Transmigration system. Male god, come here. Transmigration system. Male god, come here. // transmigration system. Male god, come here. Transmigration system. Male god, come here. To make it easier for you to read next time, you can click the button at the bottom to record the reading record. You can see it when you open the bookshelf next time. If you like Transmigration system, Male god, come here. Chapter 339. Yi Yuxuan? Yuxuan? Xian Xian? Little baby? Big cutie? Fuck. Do you want me to give you a needle? Why can't you wake up? Yi Yuxuan only felt that his eyelids were unusually heavy. He heard Qin Xiu's voice, chattering, and there was a strange irritation in his heart. Irritable, Yi Yuxuan finally opened his eyes. He quickly looked at the bed. The woman on the bed was lying quietly. Her eyebrows and eyes were calm, and there was no quickness when she opened her eyes. But she was quiet and unusually soft. Qin Xiu glanced at his hand. What are you doing with your hand on Wei Wei Bai's stomach? Yi Yuxuan pondered for a while, and then said flatly, I always feel that I have a child with her, in the belly. Qin Xiu. The air was quiet for about a minute. Qin Xiu suddenly pushed Yi Yuxuan away and pointed at his nose angrily. Yi Yuxuan, you beast, how can you take advantage of people when they are in danger? You can even lay your hands on a person in a vegetative state and even kill him. God, is this world devoid of morality, or is it devoid of humanity? Yi Yuxuan was silent for a few seconds before he understood what he meant. He opened his mouth to make it clear. Qin Xiu had already reached out to carry Wei Wei Bai. No, I can't handle the pregnancy. I'll take the pregnant woman to the gynecologist first. Yi Yuxuan reached out, gently grabbed the back collar of his white coat, and pulled hard. Qin Xiu couldn't control his whole body and staggered back, directly hitting the wall. Then Yi Yuxuan reached out and covered Wei Wei Bai with the quilt again. His eyes flashed with a lot of emotions, entangled into a feeling that even he couldn't understand. Yi Yuxuan had read a lot of books during this time, all about emotional analysis. His emotions would only be stirred up by one person. Facing Qin Xiu was good. Facing anyone was the same. He still had no feelings. But as long as he was by Wei Wei Bai's side, he was sure that he was the woman in his dreams. The emotions hidden in his body that had long since died, they were all revived and awakened. It was like a ferocious beast that had been lurking for more than 20 years. He finally opened his eyes. Qin Xiu covered his head that was hit. If you're pregnant, you need to see a doctor. Why did you push me? Yi Yuxuan said calmly, it's flowing again. Qin Xiu, he had to slow down. Because of Wei Wei Bai's drowsiness, he had the habit of checking her body every day. She wasn't pregnant yesterday. She was pregnant and had a miscarriage today? Yi Yuxuan added. In a dream. Qin Xiu. Fuck. Can you not speak with such a big breath? Did I give you an orgasm in my dream? Qin Xiu felt that he was going to have a nervous breakdown. So in the dream, you married Wei Wei Bai, got pregnant and had a miscarriage? Don't tell me you'll still die a horrible death in the end? Yi Yuxuan was silent, and silent again. Qin Xiu. What's with this dark atmosphere? It's cold. Finally, Yi Yuxuan said, he's crazy. The abandoned ex-wife of the Red second generation follow-up, So Xian, didn't come to Wei Wei Bai's funeral. Chen Wenfeng took care of everything. He wore a black trench coat, lost a lot of weight, and the outline of his face was fierce and cold. The funeral went smoothly. Some people felt pity, some were sad. Some were perfunctory, some were calm. Chen Wenfeng stayed at the funeral until the end. In the end, even the sad old Master Su left. He was the only one standing in front of the tombstone. On the tombstone, her portrait was the gloomy appearance before she changed. He later realized that Wei Wei Bai, who suddenly changed her temperament, didn't leave any photos for them. /collect. Chapter 340. It was as if she came and left. It was so easy and left no trace. My sister, Chen Wenfeng finally said, my sister has been paranoid since she was a child. So after she fell in love with So Xian, she went crazy. She was really crazy. She would do anything for love. When she heard that So Xian fell in love with Wei Wei Bai, not only did she collude with Su Tang to sell their information, but in the end, she failed and directly took the gun from the United States. She guarded So Xian's door just to kill Wei Wei Bai. I didn't let her get bail because of mental illness. Instead, I let her go to prison to repent for the rest of her life. For Xin Xia, death was not terrible. The most terrible thing was to be in prison for the rest of her life. Whether it is me or So Xian, we are all scum who hurt you. You could have lived a happy life. Speaking of this, Chen Wenfeng suddenly felt a little sour. He looked up at the sky and said with a choked voice, if only you had never met us. If she had not met them, Wei Wei Bai would not have fallen in love with So Xian. If she had not met them, Wei Wei Bai would not have been able to pull herself together, only to lose her life because of his sister's madness. They were all murderers. No one was an exception. Chen Wenfeng never knew that he could love someone so deeply. And when she died, he really realized that after losing her, other than being full of regret, everything else had lost its meaning. Without her, he was just a walking corpse for the rest of his life. The next morning, Chen Wenfeng left with dew all over his body. So Xian still did not appear. Chen Wenfeng also knew how much courage it took to face this funeral. So Xian obviously did not have this courage. But one day passed, 2 days, 1 week, 1 month. So Xian still did not appear. Chen Wenfeng finally felt that something was wrong. He knocked on So Xian's door. It was the nanny who opened the door. So Xian? Chen Wenfeng was really angry. It was already too much for him not to show up on the day of the funeral. A month had passed, and he hadn't even gone to the cemetery to take a look. When people leave, the tea cools down. Su Xian was getting cold too fast. The nanny was a little scared and didn't know what to say, so she could only turn around and let Chen Wenfeng in. Chen Wenfeng stormed in with a gloomy face. The air was filled with a sweet smell. Chen Wenfeng suddenly stopped in his tracks. There were a lot of candied haws in the house. They were all inserted into the straw targets, decorating the entire room with a terrifying red fire. Then he saw So Xian sitting on the sofa. His face was very pale, very unnaturally pale. His body was surprisingly thin. So Xian's sharp spiritual aura had disappeared in less than half a month. There was only fatigue, haggardness, and a strange smile on his face. He said softly to the air, Wei Wei, I bought some candied haws today. You can eat 2 more. Chen Wenfeng stood in place. Suddenly, his anger turned into sorrow. So Xian acted as if he couldn't see Chen Wenfeng. He picked up a piece of candied haws and handed it to the empty space. But you can only eat 2, otherwise you won't be able to eat. It's not good for your health. Chen Wenfeng glanced at the empty space. Suddenly, tears welled up. Chen Wenfeng clenched his teeth and said, So Xian, wake up. So Xian treated Chen Wenfeng as heir. In his eyes, Wei Wei Bai was smiling sweetly and saying to him, So Xian, you bought so many candied haws, but I can only eat 2. Aren't you too stingy? /download. Chapter 341. So Xian smiled gently. I'm afraid you'll be too full. If you really want to eat, I'll help you eat it. You can kiss me, and it'll be the same as eating it. How can you be so shameless? As long as I want you, my face is not important. Wei Wei Bai suddenly leaned forward and bit the candied haws. After eating one, she said, I'll eat it myself. I don't need you to feed me. So Xian also bit the candied haws and ate them one by one, smiling happily. It's delicious, Wei Wei. Shun Wenfeng felt that he should calm down. So Xian kept talking to himself. He even answered his own question. He heard So Xian say again, let's go to Europe and have another wedding, okay? After a pause, So Xian's voice was soft and sharp. His tone was imitating Wei Wei Bai's rhythm. Europe is too far away. Let's have the wedding in front of our house. So Xian recovered his voice. As long as you like it. Shun Wenfeng walked in front of him and squatted down to look into So Xian's eyes. He said word by word, So Xian, wake up. So Xian's eyes were not focused. After he finished eating the candied haws in his hand, he reached for another one. Shun Wenfeng suddenly couldn't bear it anymore. He reached out and took the candied haws in his hand and threw them away. Then he grabbed Su Xian's collar and shook him fiercely. Su Xian, you motherfucker, wake up. You coward who doesn't dare to face the reality. She is dead. She is not here. In the end, Shun Wenfeng was crying. After Wei Wei Bai's death, he was in a state of collapse. But there were too many things to deal with. He could only force himself to deal with everything. But today, seeing So Xian like this, Shun Wenfeng found that he couldn't hold on anymore. So Xian was confused for a while before he recognized the person in front of him. Rotten Shin, didn't you say you wouldn't pester Wei Wei anymore? Why did you come to my house? Shun Wenfeng said, I came to your house to beat you up. After that, he clenched his fist and punched him in the face. So Xian was punched by him until blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. Shun Wenfeng punched him again. He staggered several steps and almost couldn't stand still. His fist wasn't enough. He even used his foot. Su Xian was finally enraged. He suddenly went crazy and fought with Shun Wenfeng. The two of them were like wounded lone wolves, fighting and beating each other. It's as if they won't stop until they kill each other. Shun Wenfeng's face was covered with blood. He cursed sarcastically. Where is Wei Wei? Where is she? Are you addicted to act? She's dead. So, you trash. A piece of trash. Susi and didn't want to listen. He subconsciously rejected these words. Where is Wei Wei? Of course she's at home, by his side. He frantically attacked Shun Wenfeng. The things in the house were smashed beyond recognition. Shun Wenfeng pushed the candied haws to the ground and trampled them. So Xian was suddenly shocked. He quickly went to save the candied haws. Wei Wei likes to eat. Don't break them. Shun Wenfeng suddenly couldn't step on them. He lost all his strength and stood there blankly. So Xian quickly went to pick up the candied haws. 1, 2, 3. Tears suddenly dripped down. He lowered his head and tears crazily poured out. Shun Wenfeng also turned his head away. His face was full of tears. The two big men faced the messy house and the broken candied haws and cried their hearts out. Shun Wenfeng's arrival woke So Xian up. He whispered, Wei Wei is dead. Shun Wenfeng said, yes. So Xian got up with a pale face and then went to take a shower and change clothes. Shun Wenfeng saw him reappear. He was wearing a black suit with a pink corsage. Su Xian collected the intact candied haws and carefully wrapped them with wrapping paper, turning them into a large number of candied haws flower shapes. Let's go. I'm going to see her. // T. Chapter 342. Shun Wenfeng looked at his clothes, his heart filled with bitterness. Wei Wei Bai was wearing a wedding dress before she died. At that time, she had already forgiven So Xian and even wanted to start over with him. So Xian wearing this today was also an answer to Wei Wei Bai. She wanted to start over. He also wanted to. They came to the cemetery. So Xian said, I'll stay with Wei Wei for a while, you go away. Shun Wenfeng coldly snorted and finally walked further away. So Xian put the candied haws in his hand in front of her grave. He didn't speak, just stood there and looked at the tombstone. After a long time, he suddenly laughed. Wei Wei, me too. I suddenly feel that the person I should marry in this life is you. Shun Wenfeng has been standing not far away, and he didn't listen to what So Xian was saying. There was a heavy premonition in his heart. He took out a cigarette, lit one with trembling fingers, and was just about to smoke. Bang! A gunshot sounded behind him. Chun Wenfeng's fingers stiffened, and he suddenly didn't dare to look back. He took a puff and couldn't stop, one puff after another. When he finished smoking, Chun Wenfeng knew that he couldn't escape from reality. He looked back and saw So Xian fell in front of Wei Wei Bai's grave. The tombstone was filled with the blood that gushed out of his skull after he committed suicide by shooting himself. Chun Wenfeng felt that this picture was a nightmare that he couldn't get rid of. He stood there for a long time, his eyes blank and desperate. Finally, he took a deep breath and laughed at himself. You two left so casually, leaving me to live and bear the responsibility, not thinking about how I should live in the future. This is really, really a bastard. Qin Xiu deeply touched his face. He always felt that the cannon fodder in the dream was very miserable. Of course, this is not the point. The point is, you're so thirsty that you want to dream of having sex with a girl, having children, and getting married? What kind of dreams have you had recently? None of them were normal. Yi Yuxuan frowned. I always feel like there's no real feeling when we make love. Although the man in the dream was very happy, but he didn't feel anything. It was as if they weren't in bed. Qin Xiu, do you need to feel real when you have a dream? He might as well masturbate himself. Furthermore, he clearly couldn't remember the face of the woman in his dreams, but he would replace Wei Wei Bai with her every day. Who would believe that he did not have a crush on Wei Wei Bai? Wei Wei Bai was half awake. He seemed to hear someone talking beside him. The system's voice sounded tired. That jinx of yours is by your side. Listen to me first before you wake up. Otherwise, that little bit of life points will be sucked away again. Wei Wei Bai immediately grasped the main point. How little is my HP? The system remained silent for a while. You have to stay calm. Wei Wei Bai was expressionless. I'm very calm. The system said, reward 30 days of life points. Deduct 10 days of continuation pills, 3 days of painkillers, 5 days of system repair, 10 days of discount for poor people, 10 days of expired discount. If you don't die from eating, consider me a poor loser. You have 2 days of life points left. Wei Wei Bai. What the hell is a spicy loser? Does the poor have to die? You discriminated against the poor because your ancestors didn't farm for 3 generations. No, the point was 2 days. Bai Weiwei's face was expressionless. I won't wake up. I won't wake up. Don't wake me up. What could he do in 2 days? It was not enough for Yi Yuxuan to take 2 breaths. The system said, I have a way to increase your HP when you wake up, but it's very risky. Wei Wei Bai? Question mark. The system said, Yi Yuxuan's HP is enough to save the entire Earth. His aura is strong enough to scare the entire universe. Wei Wei Bai said, so? The system said, so, open your eyes and steal his HP. Wei Wei Bai was shocked. There was such a thing. How do I do that? The system roared, push him against the wall and kiss him. /download the at https://m-sashu. Comsave button below to record this chapter. Comma. Chapter 343. Cabot him. Kiss him? Wei Wei Bai expressed that this method of robbery was very flirtatious. She needed to eat a spicy stick to calm herself down. This won't do. Last time, this bastard forcefully kissed me, causing my HP to be snatched away. If I kiss him, won't I be giving him my life points for free? Wei Wei Bai expressed that she did not have amnesia. The system said earnestly, that's because you haven't used my method yet. Not only kiss him, but force yourself on him, confess to him, flirt with him crazily. You can do whatever you want. In any case, you must make Yi Yuxuan's emotions fluctuate. Wei Wei Bai expressed, I don't understand. The system said, to put it bluntly, Yi Yuxuan is a treasure trove. If you want to take his life points, you need to get his permission. Seeing that Wei Wei Bai was still thinking, the system continued to explain, it's not that he says yes, it's his subconscious that agrees. For example, if you can kiss him until he is as happy as being electrocuted, he will open up his life points, and I can take some for you. Wei Wei Bai said, what if I kiss him and he's indifferent? The system said, your life points will be sucked away by him. Even if you manage to trigger his emotions and steal some of his life points, when he calms down, your life points will still be sucked away by him. Wei Wei Bai, damn, that's why this stupid method doesn't work at all. Who can keep a man excited? Even a dozen Viagra won't be able to do it. The system said, that's why I'll let you receive the newbie gift pack and sleep for 3 days after you steal enough life points to preserve the life points you steal. This method, Wei Wei Bai began to think about the pros and cons. The system said, this is already the best method. Once you've accumulated enough life points, you can sleep to complete the mission. After a few repetitions, you'll have a lot of life points and won't have to worry about dying at any time. Wei Wei Bai finally nodded. That's fine. Wait until I get 100 years worth of HP. I'll kick Yi Yuxuan far away. When that happens, I'll be able to survive. System, burning the bridge after crossing the river, by Wei Wei. As long as his mood fluctuates and he's happy, the system said, not only that, you can make him cry and suffer the same effect. But now that you've caused Yi Yuxuan pain, after you fall asleep, you can't control whether or not he'll fill your body with cement and sink it into the sea. So, let's just let him be happy. The effect will be the same anyway. Wei Wei Bai was just about to nod when she realized that she had regained consciousness. She heard Qin Xiu's voice. Huh. Wei Wei Bai's fingers are moving. Is she waking up? Yi Yuxuan. Bai Wei Wei heard the familiar sound of a system prompt from him, and, ding, detected the original owner, Yi Yuxuan. Energy feedback activated, forcibly giving out bonus lifespan. Wei Wei Bai was so shocked that she immediately opened her eyes and sat up. She looked up and saw Yi Yuxuan standing by the bed. The handsome and cold man stared at her with a pair of calm eyes, deep and bottomless. When he saw that she had woken up, there was a ripple in those calm and deep eyes. Wei Wei Bai had been sick for a long time and was pale, but it did not diminish the light in her eyes. Her eyes were filled with a high desire to attack. 2 days. 1 day. There was no hesitation, no time to think. Wei Wei Bai's mind was only filled with Yi Yuxuan's lips and how to make a man happy. It was too late to joke. She could only forcefully push him against the wall and seduce him. Wei Wei Bai suddenly got off the bed and overestimated her own body. Her legs went soft and she fell into Yi Yuxuan's arms. Slash. Chapter 344. By Changyin. Tired? There was a lot of information in this sentence. Wasn't his daughter sleeping? How could she be tired? Was she tired because Yi Yuxuan just did that to her? Yi Yuxuan was too lazy to pay attention to others. His fingers gently pushed aside the hair on her face. Then, as if nothing had happened, as if he had learned a new skill, he bowed his head and kissed her lips. This kind of action was natural. He couldn't help but kiss her again and again. Qin Xiu's whole person was not good. He rushed over and hugged Bai Changyin, who was about to beat Yi Yuxuan to death. He desperately explained, nothing. He didn't do anything. Uncle, listen to me. It was your daughter who moved first, really. Bai Changyin roared and pounded Qin Xiu's back hard. Cancel the engagement. Cancel. Let go of me, you colluding wolf cub. Qin Xiu burst into tears. Other people loved him while he was beaten. Why was it so difficult for single people in this world to live? Also, damn Yi Yuxuan. Don't kiss anymore. He was going to be beaten to death. Help. Successfully entered the plane. The goal of this mission is to get the love of Ning Yishu. Target mission, Ning Yishu. Completion rate, 0 time, 16 months. Wei Wei Bai just heard the reminder. She smelled blood. She looked up and was surprised. In front of her on the wooden shelf, there was a badly mutilated man hanging. His body was slender, but you could see the youthfulness of a teenager. It was impossible to tell what his face originally looked like. He was beaten black and blue. Wei Wei Bai, according to the system's nature, this man who was beaten half to death couldn't be Ning Yishu? Suddenly, that man looked up. His eyes were very deep, flashing with the brilliance of stars. Even if he was beaten to this point, it didn't damage the spirit in his eyes. It was simply the bearing of a protagonist. Ding. The male lead's favorability is 3. Her favorable impression of him was 3. It wasn't -3, it was 3. Wei Wei Bai only felt that she had saved the Milky Way galaxy. She actually transmigrated to a world where the male lead's favorability was not negative. She felt that she had to slow down, lest she die of happiness. This was the first time in history. Then she lowered her head and looked at the whip in her hand. It was obvious that the original owner was tormenting the target. Even after being tortured to such an extent, he still had 3 favorable impression points. This was simply true love. Before Wei Wei Bai could look at the memory sent by the system, this badly mutilated man suddenly opened his thin lips. Master, this disciple knows his wrongs. Master, Wei Wei Bai couldn't help but tremble. As soon as she arrived, she encountered the original owner. If this continued, Ning Yishu's favorability would go negative. She had to quickly put him down. Since his favorability was at 3, she could use her love to influence him and make his favorability rise to 100. Wei Wei Bai threw away the whip in her hand and was about to untie the rope. The system suddenly said, "The side mission is forcibly bound and cannot be rejected. Side mission, please maintain the storyline of the world. The host cannot change her personality. If you fail, the 9th heaven Xian Thunder will strike your entire family. You, the system, your father, sister, and ancestral graves will all be struck." Wei Wei Bai, what did that mean? She was stupid and didn't understand. This punishment was continuous. Striking her sister was bad enough, but now he was striking her father. Could he be more shameless? Then she finally had the time to look at the memory sent by the system. // Chapter 345. Originally, when she heard that Ning Yishu's favorability was at 3, she couldn't help but smile. However, when she finished reading the memories, the smile on her face slowly became sluggish. Her expression also slowly turned cold. In the end, she maintained the 2 emojis of, "Are you fucking kidding me?" and, "No, I must be dreaming." She thought that encountering the system was already the most bizarre thing. She didn't expect that one day, she would be able to transmigrate to another plane. The system didn't send her memories at all, but a novel. The title of the novel was The Unique and Unhindered Immortal Path. The male lead was called Ning Yishu, the typical male lead of a novel. His life was bleak, and he was a jinx who caused the death of his entire family. He grew up like a beggar under the disdainful gazes of others. Later, by chance, he entered Grand Heaven's Mountain and became Wei Wei Bai's disciple. Ning Yishu's spirit root was different from others. Others had metal, wood, water, fire, earth, and so on. He was the only one with a pure yang body. When Grand Heaven's Mountain tested his spirit root, they didn't see this kind of spirit root, so they mistakenly tested it as a fire spirit root. Ning Yishu thought that if he became Wei Wei Bai's disciple, his path would be smooth. However, there was a special part about his pure yang body. It was that when he was a virgin, he couldn't cultivate it all. Soon, Wei Wei Bai discovered that he was a piece of trash who couldn't cultivate. In her anger, she tortured and humiliated him every day. She even let others bully and suppress him. Ning Yishu endured the humiliation and felt extremely inferior, so he didn't dare to resist. Until Wei Wei Bai reached a bottleneck in her cultivation, she needed a kind of elixir to help her. That elixir required a person with a single fire spirit root as a catalyst. Therefore, Wei Wei Bai didn't hesitate to throw Ning Yishu into the furnace to refine the elixir. Ning Yishu obviously wouldn't die like that. In his rage, he activated his pure yang cheat, broke open the furnace, and escaped. In the end, he was hit by the furious Wei Wei Bai and fell off the cliff. At this point, the story was only 1/10 of the beginning. Like all the male protagonists in Shuang novels, he fell off a cliff and encountered a great adventure. Ning Yishu began his counterattack and began a path of face-slapping. He destroyed Grand Heaven's Mountain. He skinned and cut off Wei Wei Bai's flesh to refine it into a pill. Their souls were also extracted and refined, and they were tortured for eternity, unable to reincarnate. When Bai Weiwei saw this, she expressed that her whole person was not good. The rest of the story had nothing to do with her. In any case, Ning Yishu was noble, elegant, and down-to-earth. He did all the things that a straightforward male lead would do. Take in underlings, flirt with beauties, and fight bosses. The standard ending was to successfully break through the void and ascend to immortality. This was the plot of the entire book, the unique and unique. And she was obviously not wearing an ordinary plane. Instead, he had transmigrated into this book. Fortunately, when she transmigrated, the story had yet to unfold. Ningishu had only been under her tutelage for a year. The original owner had yet to refine Ningishu into pills and throw him off the cliff. Ningishu had yet to go on a killing spree, and neither had he skinned her to refine pills. Unfortunately, the original owner had already beaten, scolded, and tortured Ningishu for a year. And 3 months later, she was going to refine the male lead into pills. At the beginning, Ningishu admired his master, and the 30 points of favorability he had generated were now almost gone. Wei Bai knocked on the system. So this is a book? Then I have to maintain my character of torturing the main character, throw him off the cliff, and wait for him to come back and skin me alive? The system said, in theory, yes. Wei Bai said, there's something I don't know. The system said, don't say it. Wei Bai, the system added, this is a special plane. You can't change the plot of this book. When conquering this world, you can't easily change the original owner's character. Wei Bai asked, what's the original owner's character? The system said, she's cruel and ruthless. She's a villain in the early stages of the book who tortures Ningishu every day for fun. Wei Bai thought, damn, how do we conquer this? Who would fall in love with a vicious woman who tortures him every day and wants to refine him into pills? The transmigration system. Prince Charming, come here. The transmigration system. Prince Charming, come here. Transmigration system. Prince Charming, come here. The transmigration system. Prince Charming, come here. / you can see it the next time you open the bookshelf. Chapter 346. The most difficult world to conquer in history. No other. Wei Bai held back her anger and suddenly reached out to untie Ningishu's ropes. Ningishu seemed to feel it and slowly looked at her. Master, you're not going to hit him? The system reminded her. The original owner's personality would not be gentle to Ningishu. Do you want to break your character settings and be struck by lightning? Wei Bai's fingers stiffened for a long time and 10,000 curses ran through her mind. In the end, she struggled to pull her hand back and then ignored Ningishu and turned to leave. She was really worried that she would break her character settings and be struck by lightning. The hope in Ningishu's eyes dimmed. He saw Wei, dressed in white and as beautiful as a fairy, leave. She was extremely cold, and when she looked at him, her eyes were filled with disgust. Sure enough, no one in this world would like him. Ningishu's insistence on the light in his heart finally collapsed under Wei Bai's disgust. He slowly revealed a desperate smile. Ding! The male lead's favorability has increased to 0. Wei Bai heard the favorability notification, and her tears almost fell. If she could change the plot, she would put him down and coax him in her arms. If she was a bit nicer to him, his favorability would reach 100. How was she going to conquer this? This was the first time she had no confidence in the mission. Suddenly, Wei Bai stopped. Not breaking my character settings. Does it mean not breaking in front of Ningishu or in front of everyone? The system flipped through the guide. It's fine as long as you don't break in front of the protagonist. Wei Bai let out a sigh of relief. Why didn't you say so earlier? She suddenly pointed at a disciple passing by. Go put Ningishu down and treat him properly. The disciple was a bit surprised. Yes, martial granduncle. Wei Bai was at nascent soul stage and had a very high status. All the disciples had to call her martial grandaunt. Wei Bai was afraid that her image would be exposed in front of Ningishu, so she specifically instructed, don't tell him that it was my order. The disciple did his duty and acknowledged. After the disciple left, Wei Bai quietly followed him. That disciple put Ningishu down from the wooden frame. Let's go. I'll take you to treatment. In Ningishu's gloomy eyes, there was not a single ripple. He coldly sized up that disciple. This was someone who had bullied him before. What is your purpose? The disciple suddenly sneered. If it weren't for Marshal Granduncle's instructions, halfway through his sentence, He suddenly remembered Wei Wei Bai's instructions and immediately shut his mouth. Then, he angrily pushed Ning Yishu to the ground. "You inauspicious piece of trash. I was kind enough to bring you for treatment, but you're being pretentious." Ning Yishu's body was extremely weak from the torture. He fell to the ground and had no strength left. He could only let that disciple kick him. His face revealed a pained expression, but he did not make a sound. His eyes gradually turned cold as a cold lake. Wei Wei Bai said, "I seem to see a future where I will die miserably in the future." When Ning Yishu returned, this place where everyone bullied him would definitely be destroyed by him. And she, the one who bullied him the most, would definitely die the most miserable death. The system said coldly, "I believe that you can succeed in your counterattack. I'll cheer you on mentally." Wei Wei Bai, she did not expect anything from this piece of trash system. She could only pull an accessory from her waist. Her body naturally knew how to use spiritual energy. She raised her hand. The accessory broke through the air, passed through the window, and hit the disciple hard. The disciple let out a scream and fainted. Wei Wei Bai did not expect that she would have such strong strength. Ning Yishu almost immediately realized that someone was outside the window. He rushed to the window. Wei Wei Bai immediately ran out. If he knew that she had saved him, his character would have collapsed. / Chapter 347. Ning Yishu did not see anyone, and his body could not take it anymore. He was afraid that others would misunderstand that he was the one who knocked out this disciple. At that time, an even more terrible punishment would definitely be added to his head. Ning Yishu thought of Wei Wei Bai's cold figure as she left. A trace of hatred finally flashed through his eyes. Why did everyone bully him? Was it because he was a good-for-nothing? Ding! The male lead's favorability is at -5. Ning Yishu stumbled as he was about to leave, but suddenly stopped. He saw the jade pendant with a light green tassel on the ground. It looked familiar. Who saved him? Ning Yishu reached out and picked up the jade pendant before leaving. With great difficulty, he returned to his dilapidated little house. He felt cold, and there were wounds all over his body. The pain of his flesh splitting open tormented him until he began to roll around. He bit the blanket, enduring until he broke out in cold sweat. Ning Yishu had been bullied since he was young, and he always wanted to escape this fate. When the cultivators passing by said that he had spirit roots, he was so happy that he forgot himself. He thought that by entering Grand Heaven's Mountain and taking Wei Wei Bai as his master, he could escape his fate of being bullied. In the end, he fell into an even deeper hell. Tears suddenly flowed out of his eyes. Ning Yishu stared fiercely at the wall. He was not willing. He was not willing to be tortured to death like this. His wounds were too heavy, and he soon lost consciousness. The high fever made him muddle-headed. Wei Wei Bai waited outside for most of the night, and finally Ning Yishu became confused. Only then did she enter the room like a cat and reach out to touch his forehead. This high fever could burn a genius into a fool. Wei Wei Bai took out the healing medicine unique to this cultivation world and fed it to Ning Yishu. She could not help but complain to the system, "This won't increase favorability." Nonsense. Ning Yishu did not even know who she was. How could she increase favorability? The system retorted, "Then what are you doing?" Wei Wei Bai sighed. Let him have a better impression of Grand Heaven's Mountain. In the future, when he thinks that someone is here to save him, his mood will improve, and I'll die a better death. After Ning Yishu drank the medicine, he moaned comfortably. Wei Wei Bai reached out and touched his forehead. The fever was almost gone, and the wound was healing at a visible rate. It was indeed a cultivation plane. How illogical. Suddenly, her hand was grabbed by Ning Yishu. He opened his eyes in confusion. Who? When he was in so much pain and despair, an incomparably cool power healed his wounds. He felt someone gently caressing his forehead. This gentleness shook his wounded heart. This kind of gentleness was simply a kind of bright salvation to those who were in the dark hell. Ding! The male lead's favorability is at 0. Wei Wei Bai was shocked. Even if he doesn't know that I saved him, his favorability would increase? The system flipped through the information again. Yes, Even if he doesn't know who you are, his favorability towards you is directly added to your head. Wei Wei Bai said, then I'll help him in the dark every day. His favorability will increase. The system said earnestly, don't be found out, just violate the character setting. Wei Wei Bai was about to nod when she realized that Ning Yishu's eyes were already open. His eyes were extremely clear. Why did you save me? Wei Wei Bai was shocked. She immediately shook off his hand and turned to leave. Ning Yishu was anxious. He reached out to grab her, but only managed to grab a corner of her skirt. He tore a piece off. The air was filled with a faint fragrance. This fragrance made him frown. Why was it so familiar? He remembered that the person who saved him was a woman. She was wearing a veil, so he could not see her face clearly, but he could feel that she was a very beautiful woman. In this grand heavens mountain, the most beautiful woman was undoubtedly Wei Wei Bai. But Ning Yishu sneered. His master hated him, so why would she save him? Then he finally saw the color of the skirt in his hand. It was white. Chapter 348. Wei Wei Bai did not know that her skirt had already aroused Ning Yishu's suspicion. She was still discussing the loopholes of the side quest with the system. In the novel, Wei Wei Bai's character is stupid and bad. She's the perfect example of a cannon fodder whose brain was eaten by a dog. In other words, as long as I maintain this impression in front of Ning Yishu, I won't violate the character setting, right? The system said, yes, you just have to make sure that you finish the storyline and make Ning Yishu think that you're stupid and bad. As for the others, they have nothing to do with your side quest, so you can do whatever you want. Wei Wei Bai thought seriously. With the original owner's personality, would she suddenly fall in love with Ning Yishu? The system said, don't think about such impossible things. Ning Yishu is just a child in the original owner's eyes. Wei Wei Bai suddenly remembered. How old am I? Nascent soul stage seemed to take a long time to cultivate. The system said, more than 100 years old. More than 100, more than 100, more than 100 years old? The system kindly reminded, Ning Yishu is only 18. Wei Wei Bai clutched her chest. Was this an old cow eating young grass? No, this was the witch of the Black Mountain fetish. This age difference was not cute at all. The system said, it's okay. The cultivation world goes on for thousands of years. Time flies like a white horse, passing in the blink of an eye. 100 years old is the age of a budding girl in the cultivation world. Wei Wei Bai said, then what is the 18-year-old Ning Yishu? A fertilized egg? The system was speechless. Wei Wei Bai said, my storyline is when Ning Yishu is in Grand Heavens Mountain. I have to torture him and beat him up every day. 3 months later, I have to use him for alchemy and make sure that the quality of the alchemy furnace is tofu, so that he can escape, and when he escapes to the edge of the cliff, I have to accurately hit him down with a palm strike. In this book, Bai Weiwei was a little villain with a thin character. That was all her plots added up to. Weiwei Bai expressed that there were tens of thousands of novels, but there were only a few routines. The villains had to target the protagonist for no reason. The protagonist would jump off cliffs and mountains at the drop of a hat and run into an old grandpa or an exotic flower or a mythical unicorn. Then, he used his cheats all the way, crushing the villains, becoming immortals and gods, and reaching the peak. Can't you be a little more creative? The system replied, yes, that's basically it. Weiwei Bai, what if I kiss him when I hit him? The system said, your character settings will collapse. Weiwei Bai, what if you have no other choice? Weiwei Bai, so you're saying that I'm unscrupulous and ruthless, right? System, this is the first time I've heard someone describe themselves in such a refreshing and refined manner. Weiwei Bai, then what if I'm accidentally poisoned or possessed, and I need the pure young body to relieve it? If I have no other choice but to pounce on Ning Yishu, wouldn't that not collapse my character settings? The system was dumbfounded. How did the host even think of this? Normally, when people heard that they couldn't collapse their character settings, wouldn't they insist on maintaining the original plot and character settings? Weiwei Bai, since I have no other choice, it shouldn't be considered a collapse of character settings, right? The system said, how do you have no other choice? Feed yourself an aphrodisiac? Weiwei Bai, That's a good idea. The system was speechless. Wei Wei Bai recalled the state of her body. I have a water single spirit root, and the technique I cultivate is the water spirit scripture. However, there's a disadvantage to this technique. When I reach a bottleneck, the energy in my body will be in chaos and my body temperature will drop. Only pure yang or fire energy can help me overcome this difficulty. This was also the reason why the original owner wanted to turn Ning Yishu into a pill 3 months later. Therefore, as long as she damaged the spiritual energy in her body, she would be in danger. She would be able to hug and kiss Ning Yishu openly and make him feel like she was using him. Character settings would not collapse. Kissing would still be the same. She didn't believe that his favorability would not increase. Chapter 349. Suddenly, the system reminded her, "Oh no, the male lead suspects that you saved him, so he's pushing the door open to attack you." Wei Wei Bai was confused. Then she looked down and saw that a corner of her dress was missing. She then remembered that Ning Yishu tore off half of her dress last night. Wei Wei Bai's expression changed. "I'll change right away." Ning Yishu saw her torn dress when he came in, so how could he not understand? She quickly took off the dress and stuffed it under the bed. The system reminded her, "You know magic. Use magic to transform into clothes. This smooth white, it's going to scare this little disciple to death." Wei Wei Bai was confused and immediately transformed. "I'll transform. Change clothes." The system couldn't bear to look. The clothes were transformed, but she wasn't familiar with the process, so she transformed into a sexy thin robe. But the door was suddenly pushed open. Ning Yishu's cold voice respectfully sounded, "Master, this disciple is here to pay his respects." Ning Yishu was very reluctant to look for Wei Wei Bai, because he knew that every time he came, he would be met with his master's disgusted eyes and a beating. But that jade pendant, that fragrance, and that piece of white cloth. He finally remembered that these were Wei Wei Bai's things. He thought about it, and there was even a faint expectation in his heart. Did his master finally see him in a new light, so she saved him? He bent down as soon as he entered, but his eyes secretly looked up. Wei Wei Bai always wore a white gauze dress, if she didn't change her clothes. Suddenly, his eyes stared straight, and his whole body froze. Wei Wei Bai was lying sideways on the recliner, her black hair cascading down like a waterfall, draping over her snow-white body. She was only wearing a thin, translucent white gauze, which stuck to her tender and smooth skin, like a layer of mist faintly discernible. Her eyes were half closed, her eyelashes trembling slightly, and her snow-white hands supporting her head, as if she was enduring something. The air was filled with a faint fragrance. For a moment, Ning Yishu couldn't move his body or his mind. Only the fragrance lingering in his nose and the portrait of a beauty lying on her side. It was branded into his eyes. Wei Wei Bai suddenly opened her eyes as if she had just realized that someone was there. She coldly spat out a word from her pink lips. "Who?" Ning Yishu was shocked and immediately lowered his head. Wei Wei Bai was a nascent soul cultivator, but she didn't notice his arrival. His heart was filled with astonishment, but he didn't reveal it in the slightest. He immediately said respectfully, "Master, Ning Yishu greets you." Just as he finished speaking, a white water sleeve condensed from spiritual energy tore through the air and fiercely attacked him. Ning Yishu felt a heavy blow to his chest as he was sent flying and slammed into the wall. The excruciating pain caused his vision to turn black. Before he could react, a cold hand had already strangled his neck. Wei Wei Bai easily lifted him up and slammed him into the wall. This was a brutal cabinet. "What did you see?" Wei Wei Bai's face was like ice. Her eyes were cold, and her tone was heavy and full of killing intent. Ning Yishu looked at her, suffocating. The two of them were too close. Her nearly naked body was sticking to him. The thin gauze couldn't cover anything at all. It could only cause one's imagination to run wild. Disciple didn't look up. "I didn't see anything." Could Ning Yishu still say that he saw her body? Wei Wei Bai sneered. "You piece of trash. You actually dared to enter my room without notice. Killing you will make my grand heavens mountain lose less face." The original owner was furious and cruel. She was good at finding people to vent her anger on. When Ningishu was found to have a single fire spiritual root, Grand Heaven's Mountain thought that they had picked up a treasure. Wei Wei Bai was also happy that she had a disciple with outstanding aptitude, but in the end, he was trash that couldn't cultivate. Chapter 350. This matter made Grand Heaven's Mountain suffer ridicule. Wei Wei Bai felt even more humiliated, so she abused Ningishu even more. Wei Wei Bai wondered why the original owner of her transmigration all liked to seek death. What was even worse was that she had to continue doing it after coming here. Her fingers pinched and Ningishu's neck began to bleed. Ningishu couldn't breathe and his chest felt like it was going to explode. His eyes finally showed a trace of pleading. His mouth couldn't make a sound, but it opened and closed to beg for mercy. Wei Wei Bai gave a cold laugh. "Go die, you disgraceful piece of trash." After saying this, her fingers tightened and Ningishu felt the arrival of death. As expected, how could the person who saved him be his master? He was a piece of trash that had lost everyone's face, so he deserved to be humiliated and abandoned. Why did he have hope in his heart and break into her room, thinking that he could obtain a trace of warmth and comfort? Ningishu's eyes were filled with death aura. After the death aura, there was a faint golden light that flashed, bringing with it a cold, destructive aura. Ding! The male lead's favorability has increased to -10. Wei Wei Bai silently cried in her heart. There was no way she could do this work. She felt that she should have dispelled the doubts in Ningishu's heart, but she couldn't really strangle him to death. When Ningishu was on the verge of death, he saw a golden light in front of him. A kind of power that was hidden in his body began to faintly flow. Just as he was about to explode, Wei Wei Bai suddenly let go of her hand. Her face suddenly paled and blood flowed out from the corner of her mouth. She suddenly staggered back several steps and finally fell to the ground. Ningishu also sat on the ground, his hands and feet weak. The golden light in his eyes disappeared again. He coughed a few times and looked up to see Wei Wei Bai curled up into a ball. Her black hair was covered in a layer of white frost. His face was even paler than before, so pale that it was emitting cold air. Wei Wei Bai choked and coughed out a few mouthfuls of blood. Sweat actually appeared on her forehead. As soon as the sweat appeared, it turned into ice beads and fell to the ground. Even the air had lost its temperature. The entire room was like an ice cave. Ningishu had never seen anything like this before. Did something go wrong with Wei Wei Bai's cultivation? "Master," Ningishu cautiously called out. Wei Wei Bai did not respond. He slowly stood up from the ground, and the submissive expression on his face disappeared. A murderous coldness appeared on his face. He thought of the days when he painstakingly sought immortality but was abused by Wei Wei Bai. Being bullied and suppressed by the disciples of Grand Heaven's Mountain was all because of this woman. The beautiful vision of cultivation in his heart was crushed bit by bit in her hands. The law of the jungle, cruelty and heartlessness. This was what Grand Heaven's Mountain had taught him. No one knew that he was looking for Wei Wei Bai. If he killed her, Ningishu walked step by step towards Wei Wei Bai. He stared at her, but his tone was incomparably gentle. "Master, what happened to you?" Wei Wei Bai did not answer. Her entire body was trembling. She was so weak that she could not withstand a single blow. Ningishu's murderous intent intensified. This was a good opportunity. He had obtained a small dagger by chance. There were ominous bloodstains on it. He tested its spiritual power and found that it was actually a rare magic weapon. As long as the dagger pierced the heart, even if it was a nascent soul cultivator, their soul would immediately scatter. Even their nascent soul would be shattered. Ningishu was incomparably nervous. He walked to her side and pretended to support her. Just as his fingers touched her snow-white arm, a chill immediately spread to his fingertips. To facilitate your next reading, you can click on the button at the bottom to record this reading. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.